Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, MBs. We're back after some technical difficulties, which have also conveniently erased my terrible "Always Sunny in Philadelphia" joke. So it all works out in the end. Yay! Woo! I love it when things come together. You know, like when a plan doesn't quite not come together, so it just happens. It all works out really nicely. So no one knows I made that joke. It won't appear in the actual podcast file when I edit it together later, although I could have deleted it any time, really, I suppose. But anyway, nonetheless, we're back. We're going to talk about Wonder Egg Priority. We're going to crack on with this egg show. That was an unintentional pun, but I'm getting into it very quickly here. So Doc was talking before we had the technical difficulties about the show's content, and I'm just going to pick up and just reiterate what he was saying there. So
before we do that, let me just say, he's Shadon. I'm the Subtle Doctor. This is Warui Deshou. We are redoing from the very beginning. All the previous introness is gone forever. The Audacity and the YouTube soon-to-be VODs will be gone. So just to get that out of the way, in case anyone is still here from my fuck-up for the first time, thinking, oh, this Warui Deshou pod there. Yeah, we're going to tune in now. We've heard about them before, and they're talking about Wonder Egg Priority. Sure, we'll give this a try. Why not? And I fucked it up. But Shadon, please continue communicating that vital piece of info that you were going to. It's very important.
Certainly. So from the top here, so no one is unaware or not clear, Wonder Egg Priority is a show that deals with some very, very how do I put this politely? Sensitive topics. I'll list them. Suicide, self-harm, isolation, bullying, depression. You know, there's a lot of things in this that people may potentially find very difficult to cope with emotionally if they themselves are going through similar experiences right now, or indeed have had, as is the case with the lead characters, had friends who have gone through those kind of experiences. And indeed, when we talk about it today, we'll undoubtedly be talking about some of our own experiences from when we were younger. I'll be talking about some instances where I was bullied, for example, or even my own history with, suicidal ideation, that kind of thing. So I'm putting that right out there at the top, that this will be pretty much throughout. I can't say that we're going to structure in such a way that I can give you advance warning of exactly when discussion of each individual topic will come up. I do not blame you if you don't want to stick around because of the results of that. But I will just give my too long didn't read assessment of the show, therefore, at the very start here, which is this is the one to watch this season. Comparisons have been very favorable to other shows and other directors. I hear Ikahara's name getting thrown around a lot, which is not something one does lightly, in my opinion. And so far, I am really, really enjoying the show, although, fully enough, us enjoying it is going to be a question that we're going to have to talk about later when we get to our patron questions, funnily enough. Like, can we even technically enjoy it? But we'll get to that in time.
The patrons really came through with a lot of heavy, heavy, I mean, maybe not the right word. I mean, really substantive and interesting questions. And as much as Shadon is right that we're going to cover heavy topics, we are also going to try our best to not make the whole pod like just a funeral march.
Spiral of misery. A descent into the mire of sadness.
Yeah. I mean,
that's my dungeon master coming out there.
Exactly. We're going to try, as we often do, to like strike a balance between like giving this material like the sort of the seriousness, treating it the weight it deserves, but also be our ridiculous, silly selves. That's just the sort of podcast we are. Yes.
We are probably bad podcasts after all, so we might as well at least, wear the mantle with honor. Anyway, yes, that's the warning at the top. We're actually going to get into talking about it a little bit. And because this is our stream of thought format, which is free to everyone, there is a little bit extra. And, I'm relishing this. I'm just look at me rubbing my hands like, yeah. Because something that Doc suggested one time, and this is why I'm bringing this up specifically now, because I know this is like rubbing salt into an open wound, is that we cut down our plot summaries to 2 minutes. We challenge ourselves with that. And I've done that before for Academic Drive, as does Doc. And now we're repeating it this time around. And I was thinking to myself earlier today, if I'm not hosting, I'm going to have to answer the 2-minute challenge. And I don't know how I'm going to do that. That's quite difficult for a show that in such a short amount of time has so much to talk about. It's quite dense with plot-relevant info. And then I realized, to my delight, that I will be hosting today.
To your delight.
Yes, and so Doc,
You
think...
you eggs Benedict Arnold betray me.
Hey, you're the one who's got to scramble to get that answer in time. Oh,
I do.
Oh, we're getting the egg puns in early. All right. So, Doc, are you ready for the challenge?
Well, ready is not the way I would describe it, but it is a thing that I have to do because we told ourselves, look, a summary of these kinds of things is at least a little bit important. Maybe not so much for the live audience that have just seen the show or the recent, the viewers that tune in, within the same week. But like, if anyone, if these things have a long tail and, years later people are watching it and they want to remember what happened without going back and rewatching the whole show, we figured some kind of framing, summative framing will be good. All right. 2 minutes are going to be on the clock. Tell me when to start.
I will indeed. I think you might have to, by the way, just keep this down to like keywords, just one after the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm ready.
Trauma, introversion, depression, joy, flowers, yay, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway,
just a moment.
Your time starts in 3, 2, 1, go!
Well, the show begins with Oto Ai in her trademark yellow hoodie, #Yellow Hoodie Society, rescuing a dead bug. I guess rescuing is not the right word, but finding a bug in dire need or in death in the middle of the road, and a car honking at her to get out of the way, move it, get out of the road, don't have time for you to stop and pick up this dead life form and grieve over it or care about it or bury it. And this, in a way, is sort of an encapsulation of some of the show's themes right off the bat in this little scene. That's why I'm spending so much time on it. But she's a shut-in. She has been since... This is not going to be a chronological summary, so just get ready for it. She's been a shut-in since her best friend Koito died. She feels that she has somehow betrayed her. And she...
1 minute gone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, after burying said bug, though, it sort of comes back to life in this really surreal fashion and leads her to this place where, from these two mannequins, Akka and Ura Akka, she can buy Wonder Eggs to crack, and girls come out of, which she can save a redhead, a gymnast with glasses, and... Then the other person, these two twin idol followers in the 3 episodes. So her and a variety of other girls throughout these episodes journey through a weird, surreal dream world, carrying office supplies turned huge, not unlike the main character in Kill la Kill, Ryuko Matoi, and cutting up these little bouncy people called See No Evils. How much time do I have left? How much time do I have left?
That was your timer. That was me warning you had 5 seconds left. Like, time's up, Doc.
That was terrible. That was the worst we've ever done. I'm trying to summarize this.
It was going to be difficult from the outset, to be honest. But yes, Doc has got the broad strokes of it right. Our main character, is indeed visiting this other world, as often Japanese anime protagonists are wont to do. Although her reasoning is not to be a shithead, but rather to absolve herself of what she thinks of her own behavior, and also to try and bring her dead friend back to life, because that's what she's been told she can do here, provided she does certain things with egg, basically... like keep an eye on these eggs that she gets. A gacha game, it's actually even described as. So random luck, and every time an egg hatches, it a person her age pops out, another girl, or girls even, who themselves are, based on the implications of the stories thus far, also dead for whatever reason. They are described to be the same in the same state as Koito, and so. By saving these girls, in theory, I can then bring Koito back to life somehow. And in the process of doing this, she meets 2 other characters. Thus far, there's going to be a 4th because the OP has made that clear. But the ones she's met so far are Neru and Rika.
Yep.
The latter of which I suspect you and I will have a lot to talk about. The former, not so much, and I'm going to say that off the bat because I don't think episode 2 is really Nero's introduction, so to speak. Oh, sorry, Nero's introduction, so to speak, in the same way that Rika's is, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah. I mean, these girls are in this world with her because they are also egg collectors trying to save other people in their lives who have taken their own lives. I mean, these are all the implication, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is all these statues, all the people that these young women are trying to save are people that have taken their own lives, and each of the young ladies, Rika and Nehru, feel somehow responsible for the loss, the too soon and tragic loss of their friend. And so for some kind of atonement, they are helping. And I don't really know quite. I mean, we'll get into all this, I suspect, in greater detail when we dig into the questions and our talking points for discussion, but I don't really know sort of the kind of mechanics or the ontology of the show. I don't have like a firm grasp on them, but yeah, like the ladies that come out of the eggs, like I think you hit it about as well as I could, that they are also dead, possibly also suicide victims. It certainly is definitely absolutely the case in episode 3. They were that, and so I think it's reasonable to assume in 1 and 2 as well. But yeah, and I mean, there's just a lot. There's so much to unpack with all this. And but you know, I mean, there's kind of fun and lighthearted moments too, that I think do help, especially in episodes 2 and 3. 1 I found the most difficult to rewatch. I don't know about you. But 2 and 3 were sort of easier. But yeah, we're gonna be getting into what we think all this means, whether we think it's well handled, what we liked about the show, what we didn't, and also answer specific questions from our patrons. But Shadon, if someone wanted to be a patron and ask us questions about Wonder Egg or other shows we're going to cover, how would they do that?
Well, you use something called an internet browser, this newfangled technology I keep hearing so much about. I believe you can have it on a device known as a phone, or possibly even a computer. All seems like a bit magical to me. I just did things on abacuses and stone tablets until recently, but I'm learning as well. So you pick up, you get on your internet browser, you type in this web address, wherever the heck that is, called www.patreon.com/Warui Deshou, and there you can sign up to give us money every month on various tiers. And each tier gives you access to more and more features of our podcast. So, for example, if you subscribe to the $2 tier, you'll be given access to our Discord, where we have a really, really nice community, lovely people. You said it best before, Doc, like our patrons have contributed questions to us, and some of them are really, really insightful. Yeah. I actually went out shopping a little earlier, and I actually took time on the walk to try and get my thoughts together for one of them in particular. I was like, oh god, that's a heavy one. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, this is gonna be a long answer. Even for me, I'm known for being long-winded. But regardless, $2 tier allows you to ask questions about stream of thought shows that we're covering. So in this case, you can ask us about Wonder Egg Priority. $3 tier gets you access to our second stream podcast, which we are currently still debating whether or not it will be Skate or Horimiya. I have a feeling I know what it's going to be, but anyway, that's for the discussion for later. And of course, you can ask questions about that as well. And last but not least, the $5 tier will get you access to our Deshou, the third podcast, and also the ability to ask questions about that. And this time around, this season, we're covering Girls' Last Tour. So,
Yay.
we've got what? Look, just think of it this way, right? Stream of thought, like a girl caught like in another world with deeply depressing, environment, situation. Something in the middle that's probably going to be nice and light, and then at the end, it's girls caught in World War II. Yay! 2021's off to a great start. Woo!
I think Jacob Chapman, the year that Girls' Last Tour came out, described it as kind of like a near automata light or near automata anime, a near adjacent anime. So look forward to that. And
Well,
congratulations to Yukinon, who's been putting it on the poll forever. It finally got picked.
Well, better that it's a nearer Jason anime than the far Jason anime. That's terrible. I'm so sorry. Yeah, Doc, if he could, would just shove me out of my chair right now and put me in a locker where I belong.
Very bad.
Well, you know, we're probably a bad podcast.
Definitely.
I'm owning it. I'm owning the brand.
Yeah.
So before we do get to Patreon questions, though, Doc, I'm going to pass it over to you to talk about Chris, because something else we need to mention at the top is, even before we start talking about the actual concept of the show, I think you and I can agree this is a phenomenally beautiful show. Like, the animation is crisp, it's intricate. Some of the walk cycles are amazing. Like, the amount of effort that must have gone into this is insane. Which will also lead me just to make one very quick point. I, of course, when we talked about Redo of a Healer, sorry, not Redo of a Healer, Mushoku Tensei. Yeah, exactly. I said, it looks nice, but I don't care about the content. Wonder Egg has both. You know, it does the why not both that I keep asking for so often, where it has a lot of things I can think about, but it's also just a visual feast.
Also, anyway, in my opinion, it looks way better. And maybe that's because I'm prejudicing the production design and, you know, the color palette, the character designs, things like that, you know, over pure raw animation. But, like, I don't know, man. Fucking Jobless Reincarnation was a green-brown fantasy world, you know, seen a million of them. Like, this show is bright and kind of surreal, lurid, and very colorful. Yeah, it's I find it more enjoyable to behold from a like pure visual eye candy type perspective than the other show. So to me, it's a no contest. Although I respect the fluid motions, but like you said, this show has them too. So and I'm glad you brought this up, because on a podcast where you and I are on it, that aspect of a show, like for a show like this, would probably tend to get lost, because there's so much just narrative meat on the bone and thematic stuff to chew on. So thank you for bringing that up for the Sakuga heads out there. But yeah, this show, Wonder Egg Priority, anime original joint, from Cloverworks, titans of the industry this season, bringing us three like really like either kind of big IP like The Promised Neverland, or extremely like glossy, high production value looking shows like this one and Horimiya. What the hell, Clover? It's just like it's a heavy lift this season.
I mean, I'm just gonna make the joke again. Like, you know, the black magic must be going on over there. They're doing the sacrament. You know?
Yeah, they
They throw a bunch of storyboards into a pentagram, and they just start like chanting as like candles light up, and then it just turns into a USB drive with a fully animated scene in it. You know,
they've spent the last 2 years paying for their Frank's sins, and now they're born again to this new world.
I mean, if you pray to Baphomet enough, eventually he's going to help you out. He's going to be a bro.
That's true. Yes. But okay, Wonder Egg. I mean, who's behind? Who's on the other side of the paper? Who's holding the pen? So this show is directed by Shin Wakabayashi, and Wakabayashi is looks like mostly known for being a key animator. It's done some storyboarding as well, but I mean, looking at his CV, it's just a ton of key animation credits from like Aka 13, Attack on Titan, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, that's going back a ways. Gare Zero is very well animated, kind of mostly forgotten action show from almost a decade ago now, early part of last decade. Nodabe Cantabile. There's a lot of stuff on here. Some new Slayers. Lots of key animations, but now Wakabayashi is the series director for Wonder Egg and the director of episode 1, as is often the case for series directors. But who wrote the show? who's the head writer. So the head writer and the script writer for all 3 episodes is Shinji Nojima. And if you look for Nojima's CV on anime websites, you will find nothing because this is their first anime. I believe, if I have the same Nojima, if I've searched for the same person and found them, that this person is much more famous for Japanese drama television shows and was feeling a bit restricted in that space in terms of the stories they could tell.
Yes, that's what I've read too.
And so now, they're doing animation where they feel like, okay, here we go. I can express myself through my writing and say what I want to say once again, which is I suppose why we got something this bold. And it's really interesting from this first time anime like person, you know what I mean? So it's I hope, based on these 3 episodes alone, I hope Nojima continues to work in the industry and we get different stuff from them.
Absolutely.
So director of episode 2 is Yuta Yamazaki, another veteran key animator, storyboarder. We've got, we got some Toradora on this list. We've got some Yuru Camp. Lots of storyboarding and episode direction in Yuru Camp, which is an excellent television show. WUG on our list again. The WUG, Wake Up Girls TV, work done there. All these people seem to have worked on, so far they've looked at, seem to have been involved in some capacity with I don't even know if you remember. Was it the beginning of the 2010s or the end of the aughts where there was this big Marvel X Madhouse crossover thing?
Oh God! I was like, oh God, Doc's asked me to dredge up something from the late 2000s to the early 10s, and I'm like, mate, I can't remember what happened last week. But then you mentioned, I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember there was an anime where Iron Man had to fight what was basically Captain Harlock, but not. That was a thing. Oh, God.
Iron Man: Rise of Technovore, and X-Men, and X-Men. There's a Wolverine anime.
Oh God, I can't take that title seriously.
Technovore, right?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Kisniver storyboarding on here. Classic Shadon favorite, Rin, Daughters of Namasani TV in between animation.
Oh, God. I keep burying these. I keep trying to push these things down, but it's like when you push something underground, it just pops out somewhere else. I don't think if I sealed that show in a barrel of nuclear waste and dumped it in the ocean, it would just end up at my door the following morning. Oh, God.
Well,
piece of shit. Anyway, moving on.
You'll feel better because the 3rd episode is directed by someone whose name appears on quite a few really, really good and well-regarded projects. That's Yuki Yonemori. And Yonemori was a key animator on such illustrious titles as Mob Psycho 200.
Nice.
Princess Principal, a show that I like a lot. Ride Your Wave.
Yes.
The Great Passage. Little Witch Academia TV.
Yes.
The Carol and Tuesday opening. SSSS Gridman TV.
Yes.
So a ton of really good stuff. And I've heard good things about Token Rambu Hanemaru. I have not seen Token Rambu Hanemaru. Key animation credit there. Credit for Franks, but that's what just Cloverworks was doing when they were founded. So,
if I may intercede a moment, I think I should probably clarify something. What we're discussing here are people's actual animation. And I think for the most part, the batting average of the shows that you've given here is very, very high.
Also, the animation in it wasn't terrible. If they're just a key animator in Darling and Franks, it's not like we're actually saying, fuck this person. You know what I mean? No. It's just funny to bring up shows we don't like.
My eye for Franks, of course, is the scripts.
Exactly.
I can't, of course, in good conscience say that the animation in Rin, for example, was done with the best of intentions, particularly of how it treats the female characters in that show. Jesus Christ. That's a discussion for a different day. But yeah, no, the buying average to me sounds very, very strong there. And it certainly seems to show on in this because, I mean, like there's a scene in episode 3 at the very start where Ai is just walking through the garden where Akka and Uraka, these mannequin people playing Go on a sack of books, are. And it would be so easy for them just to do a very simple walk thing where she's got her hands in like her hoodie pouch, you know, and just like simple walk cycle. And this is me speaking to someone who knows next to nothing about animation, but they actually have her like take a little saunter and then turn and pivot on her foot and then walk backwards. And I mean, my knowledge of how animation works is generally limited to, you know, how do I tween shit in Macromedia Flash, which is now, of course, defunct, and what did Isoken teach me, which is shit's hard, you know? But nonetheless, like, if I were trying to be an efficient animator, I probably wouldn't have done that. I would have just gone, right, simple walk cycle. But they really are putting their all in system. That just, of course, makes me hope that they're at least being, you know, paid well for it all, like, not being put under off conditions, which, I mean, likelihood of that is slim, but you know, I think this is still one of the best looking shows I've seen. I mean, we just came off Akadama Drive, which was a really, really good show in terms of its animation. But this is like, this is just amazing. Like, there's so many little details, like the flickers of hair, for example, characters' faces being smooshed and things like that, you know, or even just like little gestures. Like normally characters just like have shoulders that don't move, for example. They don't like tilt to the left a little bit, tilt to the right. But there's a lot of very naturalistic body language and behavior in this that feels like very authentic. Like, I'm very, very impressed by it.
The running and like some of the battle animations. Just so good.
Yeah.
And Yukinon in chat mentioned first time character designer. So it's a person called Saki Takahashi. And once again, like most of the people we talked about, known mostly as an animator, key animator, and sometimes animation director, making their debut in character design. And while I think the designs are, it's going to sound harsh to say they're a little bit derivative, and I don't mean it in that way. I guess I just mean they're sort of like, there's nothing like incredibly like, oh my God, this is super unique or distinct about them. But having said all that, like, take away let's compartmentalize their originality. The way they're executed, like just the way they look, really great.
Yeah.
Really, really well designed, appealing looking characters.
The show, because a lot of it is indeed meant to be about contrast. I mean, we have regular, you know, teenage girls here fighting these horrific, like, imagine like Andy Warhol and David Lynch designed a monster, you know? Like, that's what we've got here. No, you don't, because you've watched
it's
the
right
show.
there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you've watched the show. Like, you know, so I think it works that they're relatively restrained in their character design. Like, because I think that would be a bit weird to have them then be congruent and being a bit out there with the monster design, if you know what I mean. So I don't mind so much. I think it works. And again, the animation is just so good. It just pops right off the screen. I mean, Saka Blog, I imagine that they basically just, well, you know what? Like, we normally do individual clips. We just put the whole episode on there and took the audio out. That's how good it is.
That was my thoughts exactly.
They even do some really creative things, like with mobile phone texting, for example. Like, how many times in an anime do you just simply have? Do you simply have a character look at a mobile phone and there's just subtitles of what's been written, or alternatively, another way you do it is character looks at phone in a monologue. You know, you get that like slightly reverbed voice.
Yeah.
But no, they actually have the messages pop up on the screen with little icons for the chat profile with little pop noises that go with it, and it looks great. It's really creative.
I adore the texting in this show. I think it adds so much charm and like just warmth, and it just delights me to no end to see the texting between Neru and I, because in that space they can really be more open and kind of be themselves, as you know, a lot of us can relate to in terms of like online spaces, even though they're not anonymous. It's just like you're just writing instead of talking. And that can be more freeing in terms of self-expression at times. And so it's just so nice. And you said like the way it looks is like just tremendous.
Yeah. Also, the music in this show is really good as well.
Oh, yes.
When the music needs to be, it is sinister, it is creepy, it is eerie, it's oppressive. But then there's also just like the little bits like when they're doing slice of life stuff. And it's just very chill, almost easy listening. Like it really, really works. I would easily have like a lo-fi, but like mix of like the non-threatening shit playing in the background while I'm working. That'd be great.
There's some fantastic piano, and there's like like when I makes the leap in episode 1 across like the buildings, Spider-Man style, toward Kurumi and her bully to attack her with the giant multi-pen. And she's flying through the air. Like the song, it's almost like a beat you would hear in like a MGMT song.
Yeah,
it's really
like
good.
Steps tying up in bits as well, which was certainly interesting.
Yeah, and so the music credits we have here on Wikipedia are Dee Mouse. I have to say that because it's written in all caps. You can't just say Dee Mouse. You have to say Dee Mouse. And,
is that how he introduced himself on the mic, where he's like, Dee Mouse in the house?
You know what it is. Dee Mouse in this. And then Mito, who I guess is like correct me if I'm wrong, I would guess Mito is the OP or ED artist? I don't know. I'm not seeing the information.
Mito is Nito. That's all I need to know.
Yep. I just think she's Nito. Yeah, so that's the music, and that's all. That's the creators for this time. Next time we'll focus on just the writer directors of the episodes, but this time wanted to highlight the people that are shepherding the series as a whole as well.
Quite right. Okay, with all that out of the way, it's finally time. Let us get to the meat of the topic at hand. Let's talk talking points and patron questions. We'll do the latter of which first. And we do indeed have quite a few this week. I want to again thank our patrons for giving us so many really good questions here. Like a lot of these, I've had to think a little bit on beforehand. I don't feel comfortable just answering off the cuff. So we'll see how we go. The very first one comes from Gogo.
I feel attacked because I am going to be answering them off the cuff. So go men about that.
I thought about while I was on the exercise bike, while I was walking, I tried to get some because I thought, oh Jesus Christ, this is going to test me. But first batch comes from Gogo Type Robot. The first of which references something that I think we cut earlier from the podcast because of the technical difficulties. But she says a lot of critics are comparing Wonder Egg to an Ikuhara anime. In an alternative universe, how would Ikuhara's Wonder Egg be different from what we have? My immediate answer to that is Ikuhara seems to have a flair for the theatric and the ritual in his shows.
Yeah,
you'll see repeated refrains, repeated motifs. In Utena, for example, you have the Shadow girls who are basically the Greek chorus, the muses talking over that. In Penguin Drum, for example, you had the list up you lowlifes who will never amount to anything. that moment amongst
Seizon Senriku,
Seizon Senriku, yeah, exactly. So you've got stuff like that to consider. Whereas this is free of ritual, free of repeated motifs. Yeah. When I say repeated lines, I mean, again, going back to Utena, how many times did we see the student council going up saying, appropriately enough, we must crack the shell of the world to be born.
Yes. And then the dance in Sarazanmai.
Yes, you're right.
The Kappa dance and the cops dance.
Soya.
Yeah, Soya. That's right. Soya. It was so good, man. I love that show.
Yeah, but Ikuhara tends to favor those things as far as I've seen. I would also argue his work is generally more abstract. I'm not saying that Wonder Egg isn't abstract, but I'd say that to the degree that it is less abstract than Ikuhara's stuff. And the last thing I would probably mention as well is that Ikuhara tends to favor, at least from what I've seen thus far, bringing in references to a lot of Japanese specific Japanese like traditions like Takozudo theater. I probably completely butchered the pronunciation, but you know what I mean.
I know
But
Takarazuka. Review. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there are some crossovers. I mean, there was idol culture being discussed, for example, in Penguin Drum, and there is a bit of idol culture discussion in episode 3 specifically of Wonder Egg. But yeah, I think the main things are rituals and theater. Those are the things that you see that definitely make an Ikuhara anime stand out, which are absent in Wonder Egg.
Yeah, there was also, I think, in Ikuhara shows, a streak of silliness amidst like the seriousness.
Oh, you mean like when in Utena there is just the joke, the recurring gag in a single episode of Nanami being murdered by elephants, which I still think is the most amazing thing ever.
And the penguins, being cute penguins, and all sorts of that kind of thing. And I think that while the show Wonder Egg has some lighter moments, I don't think it ever delves into that kind of silliness. And it's almost like, I mean, for as like lurid as you said, that's a good word as it can be. I don't think the dream worlds or whatever are sort of as surreal or abstract as an Ikuhara joint could be. So like, I understand.
You ain't seen I turn into a car. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Right. I understand the comparison though, because of, there's just so much. It's visually dense at times. There's visual metaphor at play. There's the dreamlike nature of kind of what's happening to I. And there's kind of some queer stuff kind of being tugged at a little bit with I and the other characters.
That's the Ikuhara stuff as well, though, particularly in
that's
the
what I mean.
movie.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
I'm saying this is why I see why the comparisons are being made.
Oh yeah. Speaking of
there's
which, do you know what pops into my head as I was watching these episodes? The child broiler from Penguin Drum, and that was something I did not want to remember, but holy shit, that definitely came flooding back in.
Yeah, that's that is that episode of the guy like chiseling a sculpture of his daughter. Like those ones are like the most brutal ones I remember.
That makes me a little queasy to think about that.
I haven't seen the show in 10 years, and I remember that shit.
I will not lie. Like when I first watched the episode of Penguin Drum where the chisel scene happens, I honestly almost threw up. It was like disgusting.
Railroad spike sound effect is just stomach churning.
You're gonna make
it's
me
awful.
A little
Awful.
So that would be my answer anyways to that. And I think to say what would be different, like I think that there would definitely be ritual in it, and probably a bit like I mean, so I think Zhu Fang in chat mentioned a very good point here, which I'll credit to them, which is that in Ikuhara's version of Wonder Egg, Rika would probably be in episode 1, and we would probably have some sort of musical element from her specifically.
Some kind of musical number. Yeah.
Rather than the idol thing being more of a, I'm not going to say background so much, but it's more a contextual thing rather than a functional thing for her, I would say, if you know what I mean. Where it would then play into like what she actually does. And League of Emily Rand has mentioned in chat as well, you'd also definitely have a Greek chorus element. I can imagine, for example, in Wonder Egg Ikuhara version, that
the fucking mannequins.
Uraka and Aka like comment over it while playing. Like you can imagine like playing Go,
Yes.
Like there'd be a very stylized version of them playing Go, and as they talk about like the girls doing their thing, they'd be moving pieces around because they're pieces of the game. You know what I mean? And then they'd be talking about it in a very like abstract way. Like the chicks. Will they finally be? I don't know. I'm making shit now. Basically, will they be like free range? I don't fucking know.
Right.
Anyway, totally. But yeah, that's the way I see it.
Yeah, and there, I don't know, like you made a really good point about kind of how to say this, like this show feels sort of less kind of what's the right way to put this, like just the Japaneseness in the DNA of it feels like less concentrated than an Ikuhara show, which I think that you were getting at and talking about as well.
You're quite right. You've made it quite clear. But yeah. All right, cool. Shall we move on to the next question?
Yes, indeed.
All right. Next question from Gogo Site Robot is: what does the director do that is better than Ikuhara? I almost feel
this is unfair, dude. This is not right.
I almost feel like playing the Uno, like draw 4 card and just skipping my turn on this one.
You've reversed it.
The reason I'm going to say that is because it's probably more of an apple and oranges thing, really, and I know that's a cop out, but the thing is, like, Ikuhara's direction sensibilities and the way that he writes his shows are very specific to him. So I think that, you can like compare broad strokes, for example, like are they successful at what they're trying to accomplish? And in Ikuhara's case, I'd argue pretty much, yes, very much so. Wonder Egg, we're going to have to wait until the end of the show for reasons I'll elaborate on later, because making judgment at this point is very, very difficult, but we'll discuss that. Can I just point out that they're probably better at using CG? For reasons I'll speak about later.
Okay.
Does that count?
Sure, that counts.
Yeah, but no.
I think in some ways chat is doing our work for us, like doing our podcasting for us here. This is great content coming up in the chat. So Emily Rand, it says like Wonder Egg is less abstract. And I think we made that point earlier, and totally am on board with it. Like, again, despite the otherworldliness, I think that can often be kind of conflated with abstractness on occasion. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that's not the case. And then Zofang makes an incredible point, then says that the approach to violence is much more realistic than it would be in Ikuhara. And that's so true, because, I mean, if you think about, like, we were just talking about the child broiler and the sculpting and, things like what happens in Sarazanmai. Like, there's all kinds of, like, people kind of having violence done to them, but it's like they're turned into a different form, or like something happens that, like, is on the surface a little bit silly or weird or seemingly unrelated. But yeah, and again, it's just that abstraction that he's so fond of. Whereas, there's blood and impact and scars and, all kinds of,
the first time we see
viscera. There's viscera.
The first time we see blood in these episodes, if I'm not mistaken, is when this nondescript bully character throws a meat cleaver at this girl.
Oh my God.
I was like, oh, we're going to cut away, aren't we? Oh, no, we didn't cut away. No, just literally almost decapitated her, yeah. And there's blood everywhere. God. I'm like, what is this show? Holy shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of what they do better, like, I think that the honest truth is, I don't know if that's necessarily fair to compare, like, what one does better to the other, because they're both, like, Ikuhara is Ikuhara. Like, me extolling his, like, virtues and credits as a director seems a bit redundant, to be honest. But I will say that I think that insofar as what the intent of each of Wonder Egg is in terms of, like, being more restrained than Ikuhara's show and all that, I think it's doing admirably. I mean, you don't need to be that, like, you don't need to copy Ikuhara's, like, style. Do your own thing. And it seems like, the comparisons are present, but they're not so adjacent to each other that we think that it's just a pale imitation.
Yeah. I wonder if there's something you could say about, like, physical bodies here. I'm trying to remember what the interaction between bodies is like in Ikuhara, because there's touching and, things like that in these episodes. And it's been a while. I have a bad memory for moments like that. But I agree with you in terms of, like, not that it's apples and oranges, but, like, like, making a good show, what is Wakabayashi, like, making sure is done better. And she says character animation in chat. I think that's probably fair. Maybe maybe there's just less of a focus on, let's get this running animation to be as real as fucking possible from Iku. But yeah, and it's so early to be talking about, like, Wakabayashi's style when, like, this is, I think, the first thing that they're directing, and, like, we have such a body of work from Iku to look at and say, here's the hallmarks of your work. So But let's hope we get just as many from Wakabayashi here, and we can look forward to that.
Indeed. Thank you for your questions, Go Site Robot. We're going to move on to a former contributor of Warui Deshou, and I think we can probably say right now we definitely like to have her back for this particular show. Emily Rand has chimed in with a couple of questions. Before I read these out, I want to just give it a quick plug. There is a lot of use of flowers as symbolism and flower language in these episodes. And Emily has written extensively about these 3 episodes and what the flowers represent in them. Now, for the sake of not reciting her, I'm just saying you should definitely go read, because she'll do a better job explaining than I could. Plus, it's not my own knowledge. Like, I know that, for example, sunflower, bright, cheery, cool, great, moving on. Definitely go check out her stuff. It's For Me in Full Bloom at WordPress.
Yeah, .wordpress.com.
Thank you for that. You can also find it at AJ the Fourth on Twitter, where all of her work has been linked. I would very highly recommend you give stuff a read if you haven't already done so, because it will lay bare the use of flowers in this show and the meaning behind them. And indeed, there is a very deliberate use of them here as well. It's not just we're putting this in to look pretty. There is meaning to be drawn from this that infers both like the setting and the mood that the characters are in, and also their emotional states, but also contrast between like how they view themselves. I, for example, has a sunflower on her hoodie, when of course sunflowers are like, about brightness.
This isn't
dawn.
This is an ironic. This is an ironic sunflower, isn't it?
Happiness and all that. I presents herself as being incapable of any of those things. Really, she's not happy. I would describe her as she's introverted, she's withdrawn, but maybe that's just a part of her nature that she's denying herself because she thinks so little of herself, that kind of thing.
She's like, one like waiting to be discovered, like waiting for someone to bring that out of her. And I think maybe the show, it's a little early to say, but I think I have a suspicion that the show might be thinking like that kind of thing is in everyone, and it's waiting to be drawn out from other people, from all of us. I think one of the things I think that the show succeeds at, maybe one of the chief things, is demonstrating that all kinds of people are lonely. That there's not just one certain kind of person, right? That the shy introvert. Because you have Rika, the extrovert, bubbly, friendly, popular, terribly, fiercely lonely character. And all of us are in some ways, all types of people. Now then there's kind of other things in the show. I'm like, okay, so I hope adjacent points to this, they also hit out of the park just as well as this. But I think that is done really well. Sorry, you were bigging up Emily, and yeah, she's your girl in terms of flower language in any anime whatsoever. Go ahead.
Yeah, that sunflower thing I mentioned and the nuance behind that is just one instance of that in this show. There is more of it. So definitely, even Sue Fang actually in chat has just said that the hoodie is a psychological armor she puts on to put a cheer face people. That's an entirely valid interpretation. But again, the nuance is there, and I would very highly recommend you read her work on it, again, at AJ the Fourth, at For Me in Full Bloom at wordpress.wordpress.com, and definitely give that all a look. It'll be deeply informative to your reading of the show. But anyway, questions from her, of course. The first one is, what were your initial impressions of Rika, and what were your ending impressions of her? Woo!
Oh my god! Just fucking. This is one of the most difficult topics I feel like we're gonna try to tackle.
Yeah, this. I'm gonna my use.
Do you want me to go first, or do you want to go first?
I'll give it a go.
Okay.
My use of this word may come across very strongly, but I think it's probably the most apt element of it, or the most apt way to use the word, which is, I think Rika is probably the most controversial thing in this show at the moment.
Probably so, yeah.
Now,
sure.
When you think controversy, you think people riding the streets. I don't even think it's that, but I
GameStop.
think no, oh God,
that's what I think of when I think of fucking controversy these days.
Oh God, I was waiting for that to come up. But anyway, but more like I mean that people have some reservations about where her character's going and her purpose. And indeed, Emily has another question for us that we will tackle that in a moment, which I must stress, like, I can't immediately disagree with any of those, but they're asking for my opinion. So initial impressions were, oh boy, she's just going to use I for, literally just to have a repeat of what she did to Chiaki, was it? I think it was. I can't remember the name now. Chiyomi, sorry, yes, Chiyomi. Where just using her for money, basically, just exploiting her. Violating her personal space. Like, she literally invites herself into Ai's house in the first episode and stays overnight. And I don't think she ever really explicitly asked permission from Ai, but it was just kind of tolerated. So my initial impression was, oh god, I actually got. I don't know if this is maybe a fair comparison. You can maybe sound this out, do you remember? I think it was Kyoko from Madoka Magica, the redhead.
Oh boy, I thought you were gonna say the fox from BNA, but
no.
Kyoko, boy, I'm struggling. It's been about as long as it's been since I've seen Penguin Drum, since I've seen Madoka. So no, I do not remember.
I got vibes of that kind of character where the initial like impression is one of all in your face, all the time. Like, I rule it. Like, I rule all I see. I control all I see. That kind of thing. Someone who's very much in charge and is not afraid to muscle in on territory. So that was the kind of vibe I was getting. At the end, we learn some things throughout the episode. For one thing, we learn that Rika has, in the past, whether or not this is recently or not, has been self-harming by inflicting cutting wounds on her arm. That's where the self-harm element comes in, which I want to point out, by the way. I'm very, very glad the show was not pulling its punches and showing that off. It wasn't like, some sort of, well, I've hurt myself in the past kind of thing, No, it showed us. It showed us it. I've seen, regrettably, when I was much younger, people who had cuts on their arms much like that. Yeah, it looked, and I'm glad that it was not afraid to, show that in all of its. But anyway, yeah, we of course don't actually see her doing the acts in question, but you don't need to, of course, see that to know that that's what's happened. So we see that for a start, but then we also get her train of logic, and I could be wrong on this, and I think this is going to, again, we need the fullness of time and the fullness of the show to get a proper assessment of her. But what I think happened is that, for a start, I don't think she ever really came from a good place in approaching, what was it? God, Chiyomi, was it?
Yeah.
Chiyomi, sorry.
Chiyomi.
I'm gonna write this down because I am so bad with names. I don't think she ever approached it from a good place, but I think that what she actually was actively and willingly became more abusive towards her in order to try and drive her away. I think the intent were, if you get down to the actual core intent, this is not me, by the way, at all approving of her actions, but her core idea was, I don't want her to be near me. Whether or not that was for her own, I think it's probably more for her own benefit, to be honest.
That's what it sounded like, that she didn't want to have a rich benefactor propping her up, I think. Something
like, yeah. Which, interestingly, by the way, was also a sideways criticism of the idol industry.
Yeah, sure.
Which, which I thought was quite neat. But yeah, and so I think that in her own naive way, well, if I, say all these horrible things to her, she'll go away. She'll be gone, out of the way. And that had disastrous consequences in the end. One thing I want to point out, by the way, that kind of struck me about how awful this is that we go from her saying that Chiemi's she was a fatty, she was overweight, and she is presented in the show as, I'll say, being plus sized, okay? But then we cut to literally in a very sharp moment of, oh, she had withered down to being ultra skinny and died from emaciation. And I want to just point out the dissonance in that, because the show cuts from oh, this was her before, and then this is her literally in a coffin, emaciated, Jesus fucking Christ. But you have to consider how long that would take to happen. It wouldn't happen overnight.
No.
And the wasting away that must have involved, and how many days she must have spent in pain. Ugh, it's horrific when you think about it like that. So my opinion of her, basically in the end, was, I think that in some way, maybe her actions towards I in the show are similarly meant to push her away. Like if I come all on hard, she'll recognize that I'm an exploitative person. You know, I'm going to go on the offensive, so to speak, if you know what I mean. Now, that's a completely wrong way of doing it. It's not an action that should be condoned. But Rika is actually, this will tie into Emily's second question, but Rika, I think, is a kind of necessary element in the show proper. Which is leads me on to Emily's question. But before I say any more, though, do you want anything else? Because
I would love to answer the question.
please do.
Yes.
Please do. Sorry,
I'm giving you a hard time. So, oh boy. Well, I think Zofang makes an interesting point for us to remember, and this is, I think, what you also got at this when you said we need the fullness of time, in that, like, a lot of these young women are not reliable narrators about their own lives. You know, I believe she is betrayed. Why can I not think of her friend's name now? Koito, yes. Believe she's betrayed her. We don't know yet if that's the case. Suzuhara, the gymnast, was gaslighted by her coach, so she believed all these terrible things about herself that were untrue. And so perhaps Rika is also projecting some things onto those memories that we've only gotten her side of the story. Now, there's other actions that you talk about, and so let me answer the question directly. How did I feel about her in the beginning, and how do I feel about her now? Well, I think some people who've listened to me for a little while might think that I really hate her, or did in the beginning, and could not be further from the truth. Now, in the very beginning, when I first watched the episode, you know, one of the first things she does is like engage in some fat shaming, which I hate. And that really took me aback and did like kind of set me against her. But I found pretty quickly that my overall kind of feeling toward her was one of sympathy and empathy, honestly, because she's a mess, Shadon. I mean, broken home, you know, divorced situation happening there, has trust issues, you know, says she doesn't care about calling her mom to let her know she's staying with I because everyone's slimy when you scratch beneath the surface, you know, engaging in self-harm. And when you see at the point you are introduced to Rika, you understand the relationship between one of the ladies holding the egg and the statue is one of, like, you know, deep connection, like, and some, you think love, right? Because like, like this person in my life has taken their own life and I feel responsible because I care about them and I want to atone. And yet here she is fat shaming her and, you know, disrespecting her seemingly. I think she just, because of the environment she's a product of and, you know, being in the industry she's in, I mean, she...
Yeah, so that's a very good point. Like, that's probably been codified in, like, you've got to be skinny, and therefore she probably looks down on people who are not conventionally, you know, skinny. Yeah, so there you go.
That's a part of it, too. I just think there's just a lot of, like, disordered feelings and jumbled emotions in a person that doesn't know how to healthily synthesize them or express them or anything like that, you know. And it's a really bold choice to put a character like this in the show as a protagonist, you know, as someone who's siding with I, when like this has been a show about confronting abuse, confronting bullying, and standing up to that in different kinds of ways. And here we have this protagonist that, you know, you could, I think, rightfully look at her and be like, well, she's engaging in that to some degree. But
yeah,
clearly that doesn't speak to, like, her behavior on the outside doesn't speak to her feelings. And maybe also there's some rewriting of history, like Zofang said. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Emily Rand has also mentioned in chat about how Rika still refers to her derogatory phrase even after she's died. part of me wonders maybe if that's a defense mechanism, because if let's take it as written and take it as true that you can bring people back to life through this like obscure gacha egg game, whatever it is, right? I mean, that whatever I might think, the girls believe it to be true, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. So let's go with that. Let's assume that as written that it's true. What happens, of course, when they come back? Maybe Chiemi comes back and it's like nothing ever happened. And Rika's still being cruel to because she wants to try and push her away. She doesn't want to have suddenly a friendship because maybe she feels guilty about what's happened, has just not confessed it yet. Like, I think there's this complexity to this that maybe she's, again, in the most unhealthy way possible, in a way that I don't condone, trying to prepare for, if she does come back, how do we pick up where we left off? What do I do? What do I do to try and make her like leave me alone for her own benefit, not just mine?
She's broken in a lot of ways. She needs help.
Yes.
Girl needs help. But I think also, like, in no way is she just totally lost or an awful person, despite some of her behavior being inappropriate, unhealthy, really bad. But that doesn't. Yeah. She's not like this write-off,
There's a specific moment that I thought was just a little glimmer that maybe there's something still there.
They're teenagers also. There's kids. Sorry, go ahead.
There's a little glimmer there where when Ai is climbing the stairs up to the roof while they're helping these two rescued idol fans, like I think trips or falls and has a flashback to what happened with Kaito. Something I'll discuss later separately. And she has like a rallying cry of about having, like she resented her a little bit. And Rika just turns and says Ai's name, but there's something about the tone of which she says it, and also her facial expression being a lot softer than what we've seen before, that suggests there's like a different side to her that exists that is just, as was described earlier, like hidden underneath this armor.
I love that moment because it does sound different. Hey, did she call her Ai at any point? I think that might be the first.
I think she did.
Okay, but before that, I don't even remember because it did strike me as very different too.
Well, there was a specific moment where she was taking the mick out of her name, like
Jimmy, yeah. But she never just like
the Alpha 5.
Right.
Sorry.
Thank you, Alpha. Right.
Yeah.
Zordon.
Come watch this anime.
Yeah. Please.
God.
No, Alpha, I will not watch this anime. Fuck you.
Right, we're putting that one in the impressions bank for another day, because that's very good. That's very good. So the next question, this I think is the big one, is again from Emily Rand. She says it's difficult but necessary to have a character like Rika in a new nuanced story about bullying. What would be the worst outcome for a character, and what would be the best? So before I even start answering this, I just want to affirm my agreement with Emily's perspective there, that it is absolutely necessary. Because, speaking as someone who was bullied a lot as a kid, who got in fights, we'll both hold our hands up to that, and for which the effects are present still today, just in ways I act in certain things. I describe it as kind of a high function. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that right now. I still at least have the wisdom to recognize that people who bully are often themselves either being bullied or are the victims of some other factors that can drive or play a part in their decision making to be the way they are. Particularly, things like, for example, socioeconomic status. You come from a poor household where you're underfed, you have an abusive alcoholic father. I don't need to go into any more examples than that, because you can already imagine all the different things. I trust our audience that, you could be able to see all the things that would play into that. And the thing that Wonder Egg is approaching this, the way it's approaching the topic of bullying, and it's again something I agree with, and this is also why it gets the Ikara comparisons, is because it works from a systemic level. I'm going to discuss that later, because that's not strictly speaking relevant to the topic at hand. No, right. There's a lot to talk about there. But one has to then, of course, observe that if it's a systemic issue, it's not simply a single individual at fault here. We must then also ask the question, if these girls are being bullied, what creates the bullies? What makes them be who they are? Because on the one hand, we have a lot of bullies in this show who are just nondescript characters. And again, without getting too much into it right now, that is by design. We don't know the names, for example, of the people doodling on the locker, doodling die on there. but we don't need to. It's not relevant who they are specifically. The fact is, it could be anyone.
They're like these anti-everymen. Like, these are very, sadly, nigh universal experience, right? Like, maybe not this exactly, but some form of it, right?
Yeah. So the show smartly recognizes that it also then has to consider the fact that bullies and bullied, or rather be perpetrators. Yukinon has made a very good point, which is that it's also brought up a silent voice. And funnily enough, that will tie into a criticism that I'm going to make potentially about this show. Okay. Because I had a problem with silent voice as well, but I'm going to get to that in a moment. And your management may vary criticism as often they are. The best outcome for me, I think the best it depends on a lot of factors, not least of which being, does this actual resurrection stuff work or not? The cynic in me says no. The cynic in me says that this is much consistent as the bullying thing, and therefore they are being gamed. I mean, when you literally have the two guys who, it's explained to playing Go, there is something going on here. It's not kosher, as far as I'm concerned. I think the best outcome for me would be to...
First of all, is she dead? She got... Like, I think Christian mentioned this in chat earlier. Like, she got turned to stone by the sludge vomited out by the stalker monster.
I don't think she's getting a...
I hope not, because she's an OP. Like, come on. Yeah, I hope that somehow she survives, right? Like, that was...
yeah.
Fuck. Cliffhanger. Fuck it. Hate it.
But anyway... I think the best outcome for me would be, assuming, of course, she does survive that, is I think that's the first time we'll ever hear her speak like openly about her emotions and have a moment of genuine self-reflection. I don't think that, I mean, if Jemmy can't ever come back, then I think that maybe, like if she just makes her peace with that and recognizes the wrongs that she's done, that's a start. I think that would be a reasonably good outcome. I think the worst outcome, and this is going to sound odd, but I think the worst outcome would be if there isn't any such thing, because part of the problem with this is with Ai and Kaito, like, we have gotten more and more of Kaito's backstory as the show has progressed. I don't get the impression we're going to get that with Chiemi, and that to me makes it feel almost kind of hypocritical of the show to be condemning Rika's actions while also simply introducing a character who was fat shamed and then died from it, but not really making the story about them. Like, in a sense, Chiemi died from a narrative perspective to benefit Rika's character, if you know what I mean. This is the problem I had with Silent Voice, where I forget the lead male and female character's name, but the male character was not the titular Silent Voice, quote unquote, making those bad meme jokes. Rather, he was the person who bullied them. And then, what happened to them fueled in turn his character development and how he was similarly ostracized. And I think people can make a fair criticism of Silent Voice by saying it's not really about the person who suffered the most here. It is a justification to drive the character growth of someone else. And that is a potential problem with Chiemi here, where she got fat shamed and then she died through malnourishment, but that doesn't really matter if you think about it. It doesn't need to be about fat shaming. It doesn't need to be about malnourishment. Anything could have happened to make her pass away. Like, you can write however you wanted, and it would have still driven Rika's story on. But that then, of course, doesn't help people who might think, hey, you know what, like, I've been insulted in such a similar way in the past. But why is this character being sidelined just to serve, to make the bully feel bad and, drive them to, like, learn a lesson? Doesn't seem fair, does it? And so for me, like, the worst outcome would be where the show doesn't fully narratively justify Chiemi as a person and how Rika acted towards her that way, if that makes any sense. Because I don't think it's simply going to be the case the show's just going to have Rika end as she started. I think that would be very, very poor taste. And
that would be the worst outcome, is what I was going to say. If somehow Chiemi does come back and Rika just kind of goes back to her old life without changing. One of my favorite moments in the show so far is in episode 2. I think it's episode 2 at the beginning when Neru asks Ai, like, so why are you doing this? And she's like, for Koito. And Neru says, aren't you just doing it for you? to change the self you actually hate. And I, rather than denying it, she goes, you too? Because it's like, yes, like, absolutely she is. And there's nothing wrong with that. And it's, that kind of self-knowledge to change, like, is what Rika needs very badly. One of the things she needs. And, like, yeah, to have her not, like you said, have the self-reflection would be awful. And I guess the best outcome for her, I mean, I'm scared to hope for too many good things for her, because it just seems, man, just thinking about my own life experience, like, I'm just like, what seems realistic to hope for someone like that, right? I mean, but I guess it's, acknowledgement that, like, she's fucked up, and that she needs to, like, bring her behavior more in line with her feelings and kind of realize how she feels about Chiemi and befriend her, Sorry, go ahead.
What's just popped into my head as an alternative? It wouldn't be the best outcome for her as a character, but it would be a narrative outcome. What if she traded her own life to bring Chiemi back, if that was a mechanic that could exist in the fiction of this story?
Well, I wouldn't want to see that. I would want to see... I want Rika to be happy.
We want the good ending.
Yeah. I want the good ending. I'm greedy. I want them all to be happy.
Yeah, it's true. And just to follow something up, like, I have spoken before on the podcast about the idea of creating characters to serve other characters deliberately, and where that is perfectly acceptable. Indeed, one could argue Kaito fits that bill, but Kaito's backstory is being sufficiently fleshed out, whereas Chiemi at the moment comes across as being more disposable, which can, as I say, be seen in bad taste. I personally don't feel offended by it. But if someone came to me and said, the fat phobia is wrong, and I feel like they're treating this character this way just for the benefit of the bully and not for their own, not to justify them any other way, my response would be, I can't disagree with you.
Or, like, they're almost trying to both sides of this thing by showing a bully, kind of the genesis of a bully. Look, this bully has been so hurt, and they're just a product of their environment, and they're suffering too, and, like, don't feel bad for them. Like, and I mean, in a way, that's kind of what they're doing, but I think that they are not doing it in, they're doing it in a way, like you put it well, that doesn't make me upset. And I'm pretty sensitive to this stuff myself. And it feels like, I don't know, it just feels like a nuanced take on this whole thing, this whole situation. And it seems like the story is also kind of broadening in scope, where it's not simply about bullying, but maybe just abuse and or harassment in general, because, like, the coach, the way that she treats Uzuhara, I mean, you could rightly frame it as bullying, but, like, I am more like, the first word that comes to my mind is, like, abuse, and it's child abuse.
Yes.
And then you have the fucking douchebag therapist counselor man who, holy shit, we don't do, that could go so many places. And let me just tell you, this is going to sound bad, but I hope that it goes those places, like, because I want this show to, now that it's opened the door to talk about abuse, I hope that we don't simply get a characterization of an abuser that we got in episode 2 of The Coach, because that's a very easy one. That's the monster that's out for all to see. It's not a family member who loves you, who is nice to you a lot of the time.
The insidious shit, basically.
It really sinister.
I agree, because if this show is indeed wanting to do this whole systemic look at bullying and what, like, facts into it on a macro level, then it needs to consider all of it. Like, when you rip the Band-Aid off, like, you've got to explore the ugliness underneath in full. Yeah. And funnily enough, like, as much as I say that I feel a bit conflicted here and there about what's happening with Chiemi and Rika, if Rika didn't exist at all in the show would be lesser for it, because it would just be, bullies are in themselves victims in some way. I mean, I mentioned before about examples of, hey, did you come from an abusive household? Like, of course you might feel compelled to say. It does not justify, but it explains their actions.
She's fascinating. I mean, she's such a fascinating character, honestly.
I'll end this point and move on to my next question by just saying something that I think is fair, which is Vrai Kaiser of Anime Feminist was talking about this in a post very briefly, where they said, I'm not yet ready. I'm paraphrasing about it. I'm not yet ready to assess Wonder Egg after 3 episodes because of what's happening in it. I would prefer the fullness of time to give a proper conclusion. Personally, I am going to rate these episodes when we get to the end of it, but I want it to be clear from the outset as we cover this show, things can change drastically. I have very high expectations for how it should end in terms of, like, handling its subject matter appropriately. It's so far doing all right. But I think people, if they have concerns, or indeed, as we said before, about, like, all the various content and it being affecting, like, instead, if you think the fat phobia in this is wrong, my response to you is, I don't disagree with you. You are absolutely in your right to feel that way. It is very much a your mileage may vary thing. Yeah. Just because I'm personally not too worried about it does not make the feelings of the people who are offended by it invalid.
And I don't think the show is like endorsing that behavior or saying, like, it's cool or it doesn't matter. Because, like, I mean, we see the way I feels about it. I is very negative, like, and down on that side of Rika's character. And, like, hey, this is not cool. I disagree with you doing this. Yeah, there's a lot. There's just a lot here. And I want to talk about a million different things, but, like,
it's walking a very fine line here. But I'll at least applaud it for being brave enough to do so. Particularly some of the things that have happened thus far. Again, it's not shying away from some of the more awful stuff that happens. So good on it for that. I mean, next set of questions. We got to keep going.
Go.
So our next set of questions comes from a new patron of ours named Iron Anchor. Thank you very much for subscribing, Iron Anchor. Hope you'll find these rewarding. Questions thus far. Given what you've seen so far, how confident are you that the series will stick the landing? Oh, that's always a question, isn't it? How many times have we talked
Iron
about
Archer.
Sticking the landing? How many times have we talked about sticking the landing as a concept? And how many shows have we thought were so good until the very end, like Decadence?
Decadence.
Like, I had problems. Decadence was on just. It was almost the Aizoken killer.
So close.
And then unfortunately, it had one too many, pina coladas and crashed the plane at the end. Whoops.
I mean, I didn't hate the ending, but God, it was, like, compared to what came before, they just didn't see it through conceptually. Man,
it was mediocre. Anyway, okay, so it's the topic at hand.
Who knows? I don't know. How can we know?
I don't have enough information on the creators. Like, if we talked about Ikahara, like, if this was Ikahara directed, I would say with some degree of confidence, yes. I don't know, but I'm hopeful. I really, really want it to, because I think that when you write a story like this, you have a responsibility to be careful and delicate with your subject matter. And I'll be fair, I think so far it has promising signs of doing that. I think what's happening with Ai and Koito, in particular, for example, has been very well realized. Ai's, for example, fear, like when she's in the locker trying to film this kids basically sexually abusing Koito and her being afraid, like, that feels very authentic. Like, it's also, again, not hiding away from the awful shit that can happen, particularly between women in schools when they're that age. So if I had to like say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how optimistic I am, I'm going to say a 7. The problem is that if it fucks up, it's going to fuck up really hard. But because I said, like, it's on a fine line here.
Yeah, it's at least it's not going to be, like, boring or, a kind of uninteresting failure. I think it'll be worth talking about how it flames out.
Yes,
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I'm optimistic, like Grizzly. I mean, we're a quarter of the way through. I feel really good about it so far. So yeah,
fingers crossed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Next question. And if it is that consistently good, how will it compare to the rest of the season, or maybe even in your favorites of all time list? Well, thus far, it is the best show I've seen this season. It's a strong season, though, to be fair. There's a lot of good stuff out. So it's the best, but it's not it's ahead by about a point, I'd say, like, on whatever arbitrary scale of arbitrariness you want to use.
Mm-hmm.
For all time stuff, I'm going to say it's possible.
It's so hard to
But
know because I don't feel
it's
like Sorry, go ahead. I'm cutting you off.
no. Carry on, carry on.
Oh, I just don't feel like the show has like hit its ceiling yet. I feel like as strong as all this has been, I see a crescendo hopefully like later when like once the audience has a fuller knowledge of what's going on and what's at stake. I feel like we'll hopefully be treated to some really resonant and emotional big moments. And so that might vault my estimation of the show. I feel like that's coming. We could be in for more brutality, more more creepiness, more things that really hurt us or touch us inside. So, like, I don't know. It's so hard to know. I guess if it stayed at the level it is now, I mean, it would certainly be among my like recent favorites of the young decade. I mean, I think it would be, in the discussion with things like Decadence and
Isoken, yeah, absolutely.
Isoken.
I agree, and I think that I can at least say there's a possibility. There is a very strong foundation. What we have in these first 3 episodes is a very good start, just with the asterisks and question marks at the end of it. But we can only, of course, resolve those with time. But it's not like if I watch, it's not like when we watch Listeners, for example, and if you ask me the question, would that be in your grade sauce? I'd be like, nope, moving on. No.
Yeah, no way. Yeah.
No. Not happening.
Interesting discussion in chat about, like, there seems to be some disagreement over whether or not the 3 young ladies are reliable narrators or not. You know what I mean? Like, some people think, like, yeah, they all definitely had a lot to do with the suicide of the partners.
Neri, though, to be honest, though. Like,
yeah, we don't know anything, and we don't know for sure about. I mean, about Koito and I. We know what I believes, but we haven't seen it play out, right? I mean, we don't, and we know we've seen Rika's side of the story, but like, I don't know. I still am not convinced that it's all 100%. They're being totally accurate about what happened. Now, are they being honest with how they?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I's not even being honest with herself about what happened.
Now, like,
she blames herself.
Yeah, I mean, they could be being true to their feelings about it, but like, I mean, people.
But facts don't care about your feelings.
Yeah, well, look, the facts could be different, and to a third party observer, we might look at what happened and be like, actually, you're not nearly as much at fault, or at fault at all as you think. So yeah. That's an interesting discussion going on in the chat. All right, next question.
Okay, thank you for your questions there, Iron Anchor. Next batch of questions comes from Kate Rose. What do you think is happening to I in the real world? I'm not quite clear on, is it
physical injury? You mean?
I mean, if we're referring to to explain what happens, like when I fights in the other dream world, she can't die there. Kurumi actually explains the rules and says, which I find quite interesting, that as long as they don't get her eyes or her heart, then she's fine. But when at the end of episode 1, she just suddenly spontaneously develops, I think it's stigmata. Yeah, it'd be stigmata, basically, wouldn't it? Just spontaneous wounds on the body, which is basically inferred to be like the cumulative injury she suffered in the other world. Coming through to the real world, and that actually is represented in episode 2, because after the fight with the coach, which involves her being knocked around in ways that made me think that's got to have broken at least several of the bones. She's in a neck brace. Compared to the Gattreg world, what is happening in her actual life? Well,
okay, so what I see is she's saying that while these things are happening, what is she experiencing? I think she might just be asleep, right?
Well, she's experiencing very little because she's deliberately shut in.
Yeah, I think she might just. It's not like she's like. It's not like I don't think that what's happening in the egg gacha world is like an overlay of reality. You know what I mean? And she's just actually fighting shoeboxes or something like that. I think it's just it is an actual other dream world, and she's asleep. Or I don't know. I mean, somehow her consciousness has traveled through to wherever it is, but it still affects her body in some way or other, in a way that probably will never be fully explained. So,
Yeah. Which would be to the show's benefit, by the way. A deep mechanical explanation of stuff like this is never like interesting or usually organically delivered, in my opinion. Although it's funny you say like about there being an overlay with real life. I do agree with you in terms of the mechanical sense, but I think that there is very much an allegory going on because in particular, one of the really nice things this show does is sometimes it'll cut from I doing something in the real world, dream world, with no apparent indication of that switch until like a little bit later in the scene, which I think is a genius way of establishing equivalence between what's happening like with the bullying in there, like, and then in the real, like, they are closer than you might think because you might not even notice the difference.
Yeah.
Until something really apparent happens. I was thinking particularly of the scene where she's in the science lab and she's got the egg on the counter. And there's no indication from the scene before that
I know that she's in the dream world. Yeah, I know. It's great.
And it takes a little bit. Like, you get hints like when she's yelling down the corridor and no one answers. But it takes until the egg actually breaks for her to go, oh, or rather for the audience to go, oh, she's in the dream world. Okay, fair enough. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was great.
So, next question then. What do you think of the teacher and why is he always at Ai's house?
So the counselor, Sawara? I think it's I wrote it down somewhere. But continue. This is unimportant.
Right. So my guess, because I think the interesting is I think Ai has her own opinion of this, because you'll know that in I think in episode 3, she walks in on Koito being hugged by the teacher, the same teacher who she mentioned in a previous flashback. I'm not getting any special attention from him, and Ai's like, you're a transfer student, of course he is. Giving you special attention, but it turns out it was seemingly more than that. By the way, really nice visual, by the way, of I being on the threshold of the classroom with the divider for the door, like as a boundary. Like, she is separated from Koito in more ways than one here, and that's a great visual metaphor for it. I am going to take a bet, much as I'd rather it not be true, but that's my gut feeling versus what the narrative will follow, which would be good narratively, of course, is I think that Koito is probably being exploited by that teacher. Physically,
I think so.
Even sexually,
Yeah.
Which I'm just fuck that.
And this fucker is now seeing Ai's mom.
That's not wait. That's the same guy.
Yeah.
I did not even realize that.
The hot counselor from that Rika,
I was 99% convinced it was not the same guy, because my original interpretation was whatever happened between those two is colored Ai's expectations that she thinks this other guy, if it is.
Oh, it's the same. I think it's the same guy. It's the school counselor in both instances. Yeah.
Well, I'll be. I could have sworn he was a different character, but anyway.
This is why, like, when you go back and watch episode 1. After seeing episode 3 and getting all these suspicions, and he's sitting there on the fucking couch in her house saying, "Do you really hate me so much?" Oh, what a piece of shit!
If he was there in the professional
capacity
as well,
it is Sawaki.
Yeah, if he was in there in a professional capacity, why is he sat directly next to her mother? You'd think on the layout of the table we've got that he would be like at a 90-degree angle to them, for example. Yeah. Also, like, the emphasis placed on, like, the shoes being left in. Yeah. So what's going on? So I think that he's canoodling up to her mother, but what's happening beyond that, we'll find out in due time.
Yeah. And it's gonna be so interesting to see what's it. I mean, maybe interesting is not the right word. It's painful. I'm, like, sort of scared. I mean, like, is Sawaki, like, sleeping with, raping, statutorily, in America, at least, Koito. It would demonstrate what I was talking about earlier, the kind of different forms of abusers, ones that aren't as easy to spot as
or dislodge the people in authority. The people who are supposed to protect you.
Yeah, it was the same as the fucking coach. I mean, the coach is supposed to look after you and mentor you and stuff. But like, but yeah, like like if what I think is happening, like I just hate him the most.
Mm-hmm. So let's see. The thing I want to mention as well, by the way, where you brought up the coach as well, is I think it's a great escalation of, okay, we went from the first monster being just another girl at the school to a person in authority. That's a step up. That's cogent with, like, an increased sense of threat. So I actually really appreciate that, on top of it just also being, we also need to talk about the people in power who are supposed to protect you. I can confirm, by the way, from first-hand experience, that does not work. All the time, that is, because when I was bullied at school by one particular fucker who, amongst other things, followed me home, threw stuff at my windows, all sorts of shitty things like that. I one day fought back against him and actually, like, basically slammed his head into a wall. And do you want to know what happened? I was the one threatened with expulsion, despite the fact that I had told them numerous times, this guy is harassing me, he will not leave me alone, do something about it. And funnily enough, my dad's reaction to reading that letter that said, we will expel Joe if if this happens again, was, you do it again if you need to, and we'll back you up. So funny that, isn't it? Like, we're going to expel the kid who's actually doing well at school rather than this little shithead. Then he's probably a drug mule for, like, nitrous canisters at this point. So fuck him. I hope you're Ryan L, you piece of shit. Anyway. God. I don't mind saying. Saying that.
Yeah. Listen, that was shitty. I'm sorry you went through that. That's awful. That's fucking terrible.
But there's the truth though. Like, sometimes the people in power either cannot or will not protect you in these scenarios. And I'm glad that Wonder Egg is acknowledging that. I mean, heck, when we first get introduced to this, like, the rules of the world, like with the scene with the locker where they're drawing dye on it, the Tadai goes, "Do you know what we do when we find bullying? We ignore it. Yay! Let's all ignore the bullying."
Does this, in a very take what I say as not a broad, holistic comparison, but a very narrowed, focused one? Do you get a little bit of the Persona 5s about this show?
I knew you were going to say that. Ding, 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 ding. I was waiting for you to say the word Persona at some point. I could smell it coming a mile away. Are you talking about, what was his name? Kaneshiro? Yes, that was.
I mean, yeah. Well, all of the above. Like, just broadly speaking, this show seems to be about, like, confronting, this horrible, like, abuse, bullying that's going on, and taking steps in this dream abstract world to correct it in similar fashion. P5 was about, like, confronting not just, like, political national injustice like you got to eventually, but, like, very personal injustices being visited upon these kids in school, often, as you were saying, by, like, these people in power that were supposed to be protecting them, coaches, mentors, etc.
Yeah, well, Wonder Egg is superior to P5 in that respect, though, because Kaneshiro is just one person, whereas Coach, that's the title.
Yeah, sure.
So,
Yeah. Man, people talking about the See No Evils.
I will talk about them in a little bit. I have something that I want to say about it.
Okay. All right, well, then I'll wait to discuss it till then. All right.
We've got some more questions.
Yep.
What do you think the end result will be of these Gacha Egg adventures? Perhaps more importantly, what do you think is the point of them? I have got no idea. I don't believe it's a good thing. I don't believe it's something being done honestly. I don't think it. I mean, by the nature of it being a random event, that you may or may not be able to save the person you want to save, and also that you are doing so at the expense of, like, saving other people.
Mm-hmm.
You have to basically sacrifice others. There is, God, I don't even know. But it's not a good thing. I know that much. It certainly doesn't present itself that way. And I think the end result is, like what we said before, I don't think anyone who's died is going to literally come back to life. I think that the end of it is going to be the various characters coming to peace with themselves and their feelings. Not that they forget or move on. Like, I don't think, for example, that I will ever be able to really move on or forget about Koito, but she will at very least stop blaming herself for what's happened. And, can, like, maybe come out of her shell a little bit, again, to use the old Meg metaphor.
Yeah. I echo everything that you just said in terms of what I hope is the end goal. Let me add this onto it as another way to look at it. And I will admit, right off the bat, this is perhaps a stretch because it has not been consistently breadcrumbed, I don't think, throughout the whole of the show. But consider that why the sort of many reasons why this might be like an ill-intentioned game, despite the fact that the girls are benefiting from it and internally and emotionally in some ways. The intentions of who made it could be bad. And this is maybe a little bit of an Ikuhara thingy. Perhaps they're sort of tugging at a little bit of the anti-capitalist, slash like greed of our culture bit when like, what does I ask to do to deal with her grief? Like, oh, pay us money. And then like we can like exploit your feelings and your wants in our little game of chance here. This little unfair gacha deal. It's a gambling game. Gacha is this sort of gambling that like again like seems to like commodify her loss and her like feeling that she needs to do something to atone. Like she needs to do something. What does she need to do? She needs to buy something, namely eggs, right? So yeah, I agree with you. This is very bad, and that's just a dimension to it that I think is fun to think about. I don't know if the show is really trying to nail that at the moment, but
they're actually literally selling the souls of dead kids. Now that I think about it, that's pretty grim.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they've got them all statued up.
That's where the child broiler thing came in for me. I was like, oh bloody hell. It will not end well. Let's put it that way. I do not foresee this, being an honest enterprise. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Finally, will mechanics. What do we think the egg means here? Why do they have to crack them open to have the person pop out and then fight that protects his own and someone else's trauma? What do you think the weapons are powered by? Go on, Doc. You've got your.
Well, okay. So I think this is fun to think about and have theories about, but I think that these elements of the show, I want to resist the urge to like reduce it to a kind of simple like one-to-one allegory. You know what I mean? Like I don't think there's meant to be in every piece of media that is being metaphorical, like a hard, like concrete isomorphous relationship between like this and this. This means this one thing and this one thing only. That is definitely a symbol for absolutely for that. Like, I think that there's so many different things that you could read into, and it's very kind of open for a lot of different interpretations. So, or they could just be like, like the big weapons, could be, I don't know. I don't really have any indication right now. There's a lot of different things they could be. They could just be what they had on their person at the time. And the people are like, it would be fun if we made office supplies really huge and weapon-like. Or it could be like, this is how they're abusing themselves. Look, it's scissors. This is giant scissors. This is how she engaged in self-harm. And this is how maybe she writes like horrible things about herself. I don't know.
Just on the eye point, there are a lot of drawings on her wall, so it makes me wonder like she does that. But again, we have scant evidence. The one thing I'll mention about fighting someone else's trauma is I think that maybe the indication, if I were to put something to it, would be you don't do it alone. Because, for example, in the coach fight, I can't beat the coach alone. God, what was the name again? Minami can't beat the coach alone, but together they can. And I think if you therefore look at trauma like that, like trauma is not something you solve on your own necessarily, but it's not something someone else can solve for you either on their own. Like when you go to therapy, for example, like my therapist, when I had them said this, and I'm sure yours has said similar, like, I will help you, but you must also help yourself. This is a collaborative effort. And I think that might be the intent behind that.
That's a
If you want to...
fantastic point. That's an excellent point that I hadn't considered, but that's really good. An egg, it's a symbol of like birth, and birth. Don't know if you've seen any births lately, Shadon. They're
No, of course not.
Birth is traumatic. Birth is violent, whether or not like it's an egg birth or a live birth or whatever. Like there is the person inside it is breaking their world or coming into violently a whole new world.
You know what? You know what we need to wait for now? We need to wait for the episode where I and say Rika are just walking through the other world, and in the distance they just spot this like wafy white-haired girl carrying a giant egg, and there's a guy with like a metal cross wandering around with.
Oh boy, man!
Is that where the angels? Is that where the titular angel's egg come from? Just these two mannequins.
Yep, those the two mannequins are
it's all connected.
It's Mamoru Oshii and Yoshitaka Amano.
Oh god,
that's who they're. Yeah, but I mean, well, I guess to wrap up the point I was saying about like, there's so much you could read into these different kinds of things, and that like, maybe the egg deal is, it's birth is traumatic, but like you can't. Kind of the cycle of life can't go from point A to point B without that trauma, and maybe it's just sort of like you're getting through it to get to the other side. I don't know. There's a lot going on. I think the imagery used is like rich and rife with different things you could kind of that you could tug at and get some different neat things out of it.
Maybe eventually Aka will just start trolling I and saying, "So what came first?"
Oh, Jesus, stop it.
Anyway, thank you very much for your questions there, Kate. We have one. Sorry, go on.
We have some questions from Navy, correct?
We have, yes.
Okay, before we do those, can we take a short break?
Yes.
All right. BRB, folks.
Be right back. And we're back. Thank you very much for waiting, everyone. Right, let's have a look at Navy's question. And this is a big one. This is a really, really big one. And this is one that I've really had to, I think, cogitate the most over. It goes something like this. How do you feel in general about stories like Wonder Egg that use the suffering of children as a form of entertainment? Do you find it exploitative at all? Is there a line where it crosses over to being distasteful for you? And how does Wonder Egg specifically to you in this regard so far? Right. I'm going to lead off with this is one of those questions that, to me, as rude as it sounds like, I have to answer with more questions. And the first one I'm going to hit you with, Doc, I know you're putting your feet up there. You're getting comfy. This one is the first thing I have to ask is, should this show even be designed to entertain necessarily? This is like asking if video games are meant to be fun. Because if you think about it, like how many shows could you say that we've watched that are not strictly speaking entertaining? They deal with some very serious subject matter. Like I think of Orange, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Like Orange had its levity here and there, but it was very much a topic. Very much a show covering the topic of suicide. I would not describe that, strictly speaking, as entertaining.
Right. Yeah.
I think that the term I would use is engaging. You can be engaged in something without it being fun.
You can form an attachment to it, right?
Yes. Yeah. That is how I would describe it. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't, for example, say, God.
Flag is another one I think of where it wasn't like this rollicking good time, but like, man, it was fascinating and dealt with a lot of like big issues, you know?
Yeah. So I think a distinction has to be made firstly, because now this is not me going to say, go right ahead and make whatever you want, because as long as it's engaging, that's not a carte blanche thing for that to happen. But I think that we have to at least be clear that like, there are times when Wonder Egg is entertaining because there's some fun stuff happening here and there, but there are times when it is very much not entertaining. It's engaging with us. It's challenging us in terms of like how we view, like, you know, power structures. Emily Rand has very rightly mentioned the anti-capitalist element involved with the gacha eggs, you know, and some content is by design distressing and upsetting. I would not call that entertainment, so to speak. I would call it like materials meant to engage you, you know, to make you think. Doc appears to have been distracted, so I will crack on talking. But anyway, the other thing that I'll mention is that I believe this was a response. I think it was Eric Harlacher perhaps on saying that she was not down for this sort of material anymore. And I'll mention as well, like I said before about the whole, you know, your mileage may vary on the characters, how they treat each other. I cannot tell you that you're wrong for not wanting to watch this show because of its content as a result. That's your decision to make. You know, that's your mileage there. The other thing I'll mention, though, that I think is a key distinction point for me is there's a phrase that you probably all heard of, which is "it's darkest before the dawn." I'm of the opinion that if you're going to do material like this, then you need to have a dawn in it. You can't simply just have it end like, oh, no one got happy, like, or better in the end. Things did not improve, that kind of thing. So, for me, I think that, you know, as long as there is the girls end up in a better place at the end, I would not call this exploitive, because I think that, you know, we can root for them, we can get behind them, we can see them progress, we can see them succeed. That's perfectly fine. And I think is on top of that as well, you know, while we might be older now, like that doesn't mean we weren't children once who, I mean, I've already related some of my experiences when I was bullied as a kid. That we still can't find relatable memories, you know, keep these things sharp and fresh for us. That's why I still find this relatable in a sense. And indeed, you know, systemic abuse of people through power structures is not strictly limited to school environments. It can happen in workplaces, for example. The government, or a government, arguably does that, you know, to particular groups of people. If you expand a little bit from the actual setting that this is in, which is a school, the ideas that it talks about can still be found wider elsewhere. Let's see. The other thing that I would mention then as well is with respect to Navy's question here about a line being distasteful. I think that Rika is an inflection point for that because it depends again on what happens with her and how it handles Chiemi as a character. Because make no mistake, though, like as I mentioned before, characters like her, Chiemi, that is, her existing solely for Rika's benefit narratively is potentially quite problematic. So there are question marks hanging over Wonder Egg, but I don't think overall that it's currently has been described as exploitive. But that is my reaction to it. Oh, I'm being given the thing. I'm being given the motions. Keep talking. Sorry about that. So no, I think it's going to depend on a couple of factors. For me, the question marks here are, around Rika specifically. We'll have to see what happens, but I don't think that it is. I don't think it's exploitative, to be honest. Not at the moment, anyway. But that's my reaction. I will leave it to each individual to judge it for themselves, and we'll see what comes next.
Sorry about that. Live urgent phone call I needed to take. I'm so sorry.
Fair enough.
God, today's been plagued.
I just made saying all I need to say anyway.
Okay, so we're still talking about Navy's big question, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I wish I could have heard your answer. I'd love to kind of play off of things you said, and that is how our dynamic so often goes. I think that the show does, I think it should exist. Obviously, I think it's great. I agree with you. The the distinction between engagement or attachment to a story versus kind of pure fun-loving entertainment. Although, I guess there is always, to some degree, like, I don't know, depending on how you parse it, I guess you could say, like, you're entertained by it, I guess, in some way. But, like, I don't know. I just still like your distinction. And I don't think that this show is... I think the show is in the kids' corner. I don't think that it's, like, exploiting their pain. It doesn't really seem like tragedy porn to me.
Well, one point I made was that I said that there was a phrase, of course, there's always the darkest before the dawn kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that it's key that if you are wanting to avoid being exploitive in terms of using the suffering of children for entertainment or even engagement purposes, you need to have them end in a better place than when they started. Now, that tends to be the default anyway, because that's how traditional narrative arcs work,
Yeah.
You have how many times have we seen that curve of, like, up, down, hero, lowest point, then, of course, ends up back at top. I mean, there's so many different shows that I can point to. I think pretty much all of them that we mentioned thus far today have fit that theme.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a part of it as well. It isn't just a case like, if they get put through misery and that's the end of it. Apart from certain shows and certain things like Grave of the Fireflies, which I know of and I refuse to watch for that very reason.
me too. Endless gauntlet of suffering. But I don't think any... I don't know do people level that kind of criticism at Grave of the Fireflies? Like, it feels like sort of a historical document, I guess, maybe in some ways, emotionally. I don't know.
I've heard criticisms that it tries to guilt trip the audience, which is seen as fundamentally unfair because the audience at the time they were watching it could in no way have been, responsible for the most part, unless you're like in the absolute minority, for what happened in that film, for the events depicted in that.
Right.
That I should stress does not mean you never, of course, portray those events the way it was. But I think that was the key point where it was like, no, we are trying to make you deliberately feel bad here.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that can be seen as a bit nihilistic because it ends that way as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that this show is trading in honesty about, I don't know, like, so in some ways, like, it's like this really honest, like, coming from this really honest place of how a kid in middle school, high school would look at all these things and kind of feel about them, and how overwhelming and pervasive they would seem, and how just violent and brutal that they are to experience emotionally. I guess, like, you might say, like, well, that's sort of, this is like painting all this in a way that is not like really reflective of high school. But I don't know. I mean, I think for some people, experientially, that's sort of how that's the prism through which they view it all. And I think it's approaching the traumas of its characters. Like, I mean, it just seems like it's doing it honestly, and it's wanting to kind of show you them, and they all, and like with Rika, right? It's like, it's doing this really like subtle thing. It's doing this very complicated thing in portraying her, in the way she's depicted in the show. So yeah, I mean, it just doesn't seem like it's this sort of like the Saw, like the emotional equivalent of Saw, right? Like, let's put all these girls through hell.
Let's play a game.
Right.
Oh, God.
I don't think that's what Navy is saying it is, but I think it's just like, hey, consider the fact that, like,
So please consider the children.
What's like stirring the drink is like the pain of these young women, and like, how do we kind of reckon with that? And I mean, I think it is important to think about, and there are people that are going to feel all different kinds of ways about it. I mean, there are people that are not going to be able to handle it.
And that's all, and that's
totally
entirely
fine.
legitimate. Mm-hmm. That's totally a fair reaction to it. And just something I'll mention for your benefit, Doc, was something I said as well, that just because I'm not currently in a school environment being bullied does not mean I was not once in a school environment being bullied. So these stories still have relevance to me even now. And on top of that, even though it is set in a school environment, the core concepts and ideas of like these abusive power systems that are in place, the anti-capitalist elements, they apply to other places as well.
Yeah, and
I think the final key thing for me is that the show doesn't take any joy in the suffering of these characters either. At least not from what I've seen so far.
No,
I say my quibble is potentially with Chiemi, but I have to wait and see.
I keep coming back to, like, I just really like, it shows all these different kinds of lonely people feeling isolated, depressed, hurt, in pain, in these different, just really different ways, and like, just not over the top, like, it's this really cool way. Cool is not the right way to describe it, but like, it's this really artful way that, like, it's showing them in a way that if you were in that world and you walk by them, like, you wouldn't know. But at the same time, you're an audience member and you can look at them and you can see, like, oh man, these people are just in pain. It seems so, like, natural, and it seems so, like, to accurately line up with, like, I don't know, the way I feel like people look and sound and behave and are and feel when they're going through this. Because, like you, I mean, this is not my exact experience, of course, but like, it is close enough to make me feel to like bring it back, and to like remind me of those old wounds and think about it. And it's like, but also I think it's not fully sticking with that. Like, I opened my comments by saying I think that it is, like, it's really good about giving us an accurate picture of maybe the way that these kids are experiencing their lives, their school lives. But I feel like in the dream world, we're also able to have access to like a more adult point of view, like a more like, we need to fucking stop this and stand up to it, because it's really hard for kids to come out of that on their own. Like,
yeah, you've made me think of something, by the way. This is something that I had a problem with about, this ties back to Iron Anchor's question as well, about sticking the landing. And this was also actually, no, not quite, but anyway, never mind. This is something that happened with Decadence. If you're going to criticize a system, I think you inevitably have to try and offer some suggestion of how it can be resolved or changed for the better. But the problem is that is very difficult. That's why Decadence ducks that in the end, in my opinion, and just said, we're going to replace, the combat stuff with Farmville. It's the same thing, it's just people aren't killing each other, but it's still an exploitative system. It hasn't, you've just put a new coat of paint on it, basically, one that's not lined with lead. Okay, congratulations, you've done it, but how about we tear it all down and build it back up again? And the problem is that bullying is a deeply complicated problem with no easy solution, because the solutions go beyond into, again, like people being deprived of basic wants and needs, don't have enough food, I don't have a proper family. I mean, if you come from a care environment, for example, like if you're a foster child being looked after by the state, I can see that as certainly being a factor in you being more likely to bully someone else than if you were raised like in a full loving household. And I think that that's going to be impossible as for Wonder Egg, because unless this is, as you say, like some sort of weird persona shit where it can affect everyone, which I don't think it is at all, I think it's a bit beyond the capacity of I and her fellows to change the world as we know it. But if it's going to criticize the system, it seems to me like it needs to go beyond just pointing the finger and saying that's what's wrong, if you know what I mean. But that might be an impossible ask.
Well, you said this a couple times. I mean, do you think the show is making systemic critiques?
Yes.
Okay.
That's because there's no specificity apart from the teacher character who we've mentioned, who doesn't appear in the other world, I should stress, by the way. But there is no specificity to the otherworldly characters. Like, we have the bully, the girl in the first episode, the coach, and then we have the idol fan. But none of them have names. They are just broad strokes. Right. They don't have faces even. Like the bullies, for example, are, they have like pixelated faces.
Well, I think you could be making a philosophical point or like talking about a universal experience without necessarily invoking like a systemic critique, because I don't know if they all kind of belong to the same. So, I mean, maybe it's just a very general like kind of thing, but I don't know. I'm not sure that it's I'm not sure that it is yet. I mean, as much as I said, like, that there's some anti-capitalist sentiment in the beginning. I don't know if that's just me super reading into it, or if that's there. But I don't know. But I mean, I understand the point where you're coming from. I don't know if making the bad guys nameless, faceless, like, gets you all the way to this is definitely a critique of some system or multiple systems. It might just be more personal and experiential. I'm not sure yet.
The thing we have to know as well, this is again why it's good that Reek is in the show somewhat, is that what we're seeing is the results of this, but if there is to be a systemic critique, a proper one, it needs to point to the cause. I mean, the first two episodes, we see like all these things happening, but I mean, we don't, of course, need the specifics or a tragic backstory for the coach. But
that's what I mean. Like, what institutions are being criticized? It seems like abusers and bad actors are definitely being called out, but like, are they being called out as pawns of a system that needs reform or overthrow, or are they just being called out as the bad actors and abusers they are?
Yeah, I mean, for example, in Penguin Drum, we mentioned about Ikara shows. like, with what happens with Yuri, that is very much a criticism of the Tagazura theatre, and that is named as such. There is no punches pulled with that. It points to it, this is, and granted, it comes from, like, as you'd expect from the Japanese perspective of someone who knows the intricacies of offhand, but once you learn them, you realize, no, this is very much a pointed critique of that. It doesn't, like, abstract it. So maybe you could hold that against the show, that it's merely points out the result rather than the cause.
I don't even know if
there is time for that. Yeah, there's still time for it.
I don't know if I hold it against it, because I don't know if it's doing a systems thing. I'm not sure where I land on that.
Yeah, I'm just not so sure that it would be all that affecting in the end if it merely says thing bad and that's it.
Well, you can still, I guess, talk about universals without, again, like, you could talk about just the human experience being shitty, and things like that, I guess, without, like, saying, capitalism sucks, or, democracy sucks, or something like that. Now, I mean, unquestionably, it is in the deal with the coach and the deal with the counselor, who has a name and a face. Sawadi. Sawadi is, I'm gonna flick over here to look again. Sawaki. God damn it. I always mess that up. Those are both instances of people that should be looking out for these kids failing them. And maybe I don't know, maybe this is where it goes also. But it's hard to, like, see where the stalker fits into that, that they vanquish in episode 3. She doesn't really affiliate with an institution proper. She's just like a fan who has gone too far and has this disordered love or obsession with Rika. So I don't.
It wasn't with Rika. It was someone named Yu.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sorry. Yes, it's with Yu. That's right. Right. You're correct. So yeah, I just don't know. I'm just, all this just leads me to wonder, like, if it's unfair to be like, it's failing at thing X when it's not really trying to do thing X.
Yeah, and my point in reply to that would be, maybe it should. Perhaps it should, but sure. We will have to see. See.
I'm all for systemic critique for sure. I mean, I think it's like useful and correct and poignant and everything like that. But I don't think necessarily everything has to be that. But at the same time, it's like, if you're tackling bullying or abuse of power, via, like, the coach and the school counselor, it would seem like, the school system is the thing being criticized ultimately. So perhaps I'm wrong. I'm trying to figure it out, and I need to think about it some more rather than thinking about it out loud on a podcast to all of you.
Mm-hmm. I'll stop boiling my egg head over it, and we'll move on. So that's the end of our Patreon questions. Thank you very much to everyone who submitted them. That was a mountain to go through, but very much worthwhile.
Yes.
A lot to think about, certainly. And funnily enough, they've also covered most of my talking points I was going to use as well, actually. So
okay.
That's expedient and efficient. We'll move on to those, because I do have one or two more that I want to bring up.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to firstly talk about the visual elements of the bullies in the other world and the coach and all that and such, and talk about why I think they're really effective. So the first thing we've not really talked about much, but there are little gremlin creatures called See No Evils.
Yeah.
I want to note first off, right, I actually literally said only in the podcast just before this one about how you should use CG appropriately. If you want to use the uncanny valley elements of it by merging it with 2D, you should do so in an intelligent way that enhances the art, unlike X-Arm. And it does so here, because the See No Evils are CG, but that's fine because they're like little, like, demonic creatures.
It adds to, like, you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. They look strange and unusual because of the CG, and that accentuates the fact that they are, surprise, surprise, meant to be strange, unusual, and terrifying little gremlin creatures. So them being CG works. The other thing I want to note, though, as well, I found really fascinating was when they move around, and this also happens with the bullies as well. The area around them, and this, in fact, with the coach also, is painted various shades of orange and red, and a little bit of yellow as well. Did you see that as they were moving around?
Mm-hmm.
I actually really like that because they're all armed with cleavers, and to me, it seemed to me like a result of their indiscriminate mental and emotional violence that comes with bullying. They are literally splattering the walls with the blood of people's hearts and minds, if you want to call it that.
And it's like, how do you? Well, let me ask you a question. How do you feel about this? Right? Is that like these see no evils are in this abstract dream world, like doing the throwing hatchets and beating the shit out of people and cutting them up, but they're supposed to like represent these people that rather than commit the violence or engage in the name calling or whatever, just pretend not to see it and ignore it. And that, do you feel like that there's kind of a false equivalence happening, or like maybe this is too extreme a depiction, and it's making them seem on the same level as the bullies? Are they on the same level as people actively bullying? Like, this is a hard step. What do you think about that representation?
I thought that they may have very well been representative of something like a byproduct of the bullies merely existing, because they don't need to do anything for you to be afraid of them. To change your behavior, or even then they could be the manifestation of insults or violence sent your way, or all sorts of horrible acts. That could be what they are.
But they're called see no evils, right? I mean, that's like, it seems like this is a case where it wants to be on the nose of like, here's what these people are, and it sort of tells you in the beginning, right? Like the first announcement over the school PA system is, what are you supposed to do if you see a bully? Ignore it. And that's sort of, I think, speaks to the nature of what the see no evils are, because they see no evil. I don't see anything going on. There's no bullying for me to report. Why would I tell the teacher? And it's like I've got doing that in the real world is like depicted in this dream world of like cutting someone up with a hatchet, because it really, I mean, it contributes like damage, I mean, unquestionably, but like, is that too an extreme of a depiction, or is it accurate? Is what they're doing, does it hurt just as much, right? I mean, I think it definitely, if you're thinking about it, I don't know if in your experience, when I was bullied, I didn't really think about it very much, those other people. I just thought about the bullies and how much I hated them.
I think if you get to the point where you're so emotionally like harmed or wounded by bullying that you do turn to self-harm, then, well, it may as well literally be causing physical damage at that point.
Sure, it's a good point.
Yeah, we just have the kind of middle step there, but nonetheless, like, what the root cause is. But yeah, I think that's an amazing way of depicting, like, I mean, this show is violent, but I did not expect it to depict violence in that way, where I read it as emotional violence, emotional bloodshed. And I think that's a very, very powerful image.
It is.
It works. I mean, again, like, this is also part of the indiscriminate nature. Like, they are just hacking and cleaving and shedding this emotional blood everywhere. It doesn't matter where they do it. It doesn't matter who they do it to. It just happens, It's horrifying. And
maybe that's why... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, maybe that's why that they're not in that world, like take the first world, the first dream world school. Maybe that's why they don't really attack Ai or do damage to her, because her bullying is not the bullying that they are actually ignoring and could do something about.
Yeah, maybe it's just that they're attracted only to the souls of the dead, because it's only the dead people they're going after.
Right. That's a very literal read.
No, yeah, it is. It is.
Yeah. Which I don't mind. It's. I just didn't occur to me.
Yeah. But no, I think all of this stuff here, like, it's not super excessive, but I think that, when I say super excessive, I mean, like, it's not like in your face, but I think it really, really works for depicting like an effect, like a visual depiction of the trauma from bullying that is literally violence. It is violence committed against someone's heart and mind.
So Grizzly brings up it uses a good word, oppressive.
Yes.
And Yukinon spoke to the fact that like a single one is not a problem, but it's the fact that it's this mob, and if everyone is kind of doing nothing about bullying and turning a blind eye to it, and everyone sees no evil, then oppressive is a great word to describe how you're experiencing that, what your world is like, kind of how overwhelmed you feel by like and powerless, because this alternate reality has been created basically where everyone is just ignoring what is happening to you. And let me just tell you, this fucking show, man. So the show gets me like really hard on a couple levels. One, of course, is you pointed out also, and I alluded to, I was bullied. I was bullied in junior high school and high school by a few different people, a few different times over the years. By a few different times, I mean long periods of time, and then it would change and be someone else for a long period of time, and so on and so forth. And so I can feel a lot of like, and see myself a lot of in that part of the experience. But I also feel called out as fuck with the See No Evils, because I wasn't the only one bullied in my school.
Yeah.
There were a lot of other people bullied, but I didn't do jack shit about it because I was scared. I was already getting enough shit. I didn't want to get more shit.
Yeah, the heat's not on me, so fine, I'll let it slide.
I mean, and it just makes you feel terrible because, like, I mean, I don't know what's become of all these people, and having to confront like being a part of one little part of a mob, but still part of one that did the equivalent of hatcheting people up, like on the inside. I mean, it fucking sucks, and I know it sucks because it happened to me, and people ignored it when it happened to me. How could I do it? Well, because I was a fucking scared coward, and I was a kid.
Yeah.
So it's really fucking hard. I mean, it's like, that's why I mean, like, it's like, this is why it's so complicated, and why I feel like Rika, I'm glad the character like Rika is here to like make this not such a fucking black and white, good and evil completely kind of deal. Like there's a lot going on, and like different sides of the issue are worth seeing. And like, fucking, I don't know, man. Like, the point of all this is that like the See No Evils, they got me. So I feel called out as fuck, and I feel awful. But at the same time, I'm sitting here thinking, I know why I did it, and I couldn't. I mean, and you can't really see beyond that situation when you're 13, 14, 15 years old. You can't see.
That's why we have these scenes of Ai trying to help out Kaito by being in the locker filming the attack, but she can't.
She gets too scared.
And in turn, there's also the scene when she's first in the other world with, what was her name again?
Kurumi.
Kurumi, and they're in the lunchroom. By the way, can I just point out how brilliant of a subversion it is that we have in the first episode when Kurumi is introduced, that she fits the mold of what you'd expect a protagonist to be far more than Ai.
Interesting.
Initiative. She's not scared. She's not worried. She's very much like in charge. Ai feels like more the companion, the person being dragged into her wake. And granted, she does in the end, like, step up, but like the contrast is clear, and that pops up, and I think that helps sell the fact that Ai is like really very much out of her depthness, as you'd expect. I mean, it's an other world full of monsters, no surprises there. But I think it really goes to show like the contrast between what you'd expect versus what we have, which is more real and authentic, of course.
Yeah, it's a great point, an excellent point. There's a couple of interesting bits, like I'm sure there's a moment like this in episode 3, but I can't recall it. But I know in the first couple of episodes there are these moments that Ai has the opportunity to chicken out again. Like in episode 1 when she hits a hard right angle on the top of the building she is, and she keeps running. And you think, for a second, man, is she running away again? Is she leaving Kurumi in the lunchroom again? Is she leaving Koito to be bullied again? But no, she's just getting a running start so she can make the leap to the building, because like she's made that leap, and like seeing her make the leap is like the leap is like such a really fantastic visual metaphor for taking this huge giant step about doing something in your life. Like going from I'm going to passively watch to I'm going to become involved in this other person's life and take up all the emotional burdens and baggage and just all this stuff that goes with it. And like, 'cause it's a big commitment. It's a leap of faith in some ways. But that big giant leap to do that, crossing that Rubicon was huge. And then there's a moment in episode 2, we've been treated to that scene you mentioned where Ai's in the locker. She's peeking through to see the bullying going on. And she doesn't come out of the locker and she doesn't videotape it. She doesn't do what she's supposed to do because she says she was too scared of being left out and too scared to do it. Isn't that funny? She's already left out, but scared of being left out even more, which just sort of doesn't make sense. But also, if you've been bullied, you get that. You're like clinging on to every scrap of like good feeling and like inclusion and belonging that you, or the possibility
I'm
of it.
Here. I can't get over that sense of safety.
Yeah.
You know?
Maybe they'll be nice to me. Maybe one day. And then like later on in the episode, she's sneaking up on the coach and she's behind the curtain and she's peeking through, like she peeked through the locker and seeing what's happening. And it's like she's there again, but she jumps out of it. You know, she doesn't stay hidden behind the curtain anymore.
You know, can I point something out though that I think might be, this is not me condemning Ai's actions, but more pointing out a reason why this might be that she has such will in the other world. I want to note firstly the contrast in episode 2 between how she acts towards Minami and how she acts towards Neru, where she says, "I'm going to protect you to save Koito." I'm like, that's a questionable line of thinking there, because you're basically spending your life to save another. But it really, I think, reveals her line of thinking that she doesn't. And I don't think this is a malicious thing. This is not, these people are NPCs. But I don't think she actually sees these people as real people with real experience who lived and died. Because it is, as you say, in another world, like it's just detached from reality. These can't be real. But that might also explain why she's able to interact with them so well. I mean, when she's talking with Minami, for example, and also with sorry, I keep forgetting the names at Kurumi. Yeah. Like she's able to interact with them much more than you would otherwise expect, given what we see of her elsewhere.
Yeah,
and that I think
just
is
like
very
the
much
texting,
telling.
just like the texting versus her real conversation. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I think that speaks to why she's able to do that, which is, I'm not condemning her for it, but I think it's a really nice bit of nuance to explain why she's able to act differently here. And of course, the key thing that makes episode 2 work is that the real triumph for her is not beating the coach, it's connecting with Neru. The end. That's the real win.
Yeah.
And I think that accentuates that really well.
I love that in the fight with the coach. Well, no, after the fight with the coach, and she's talking to Minami Suzuhara, she's still got like the pink blob on like, the top of her head. And this was just a little thing. It was it was gross that she got that on her, but like it made me think that the fact that it didn't go away, it didn't vanish when the coach went away. It made me think of like, just because now this abuser has been cut out of Suzuhara's life and she's taken a step to like free herself of that, it doesn't mean that like, oh yeah, it's all wrapped up in a bow now and it's all done and we've figured it out and we saw it. But like, there's still sludge, there's still scars, from that encounter that will like, there's still more work to be done, I guess. And the show is really good about that. The show is great, I think, about communicating that this is not simple. This is not something that can be neatly and tidily wrapped up in your life, and I really like it for that.
Yeah. My final talking point, I have a lot more I could say, but for the sake of time, because I think we're getting on a little bit here, we need to start progressing towards the finish.
Let's talk more.
The one final thing I'll mention is about the statues. Why do we have statues? What I think is really interesting about this, because I think it ties again to the idea of, like, can I turn back time? Can I bring them back to life? Is in Koito's case, like, her statue is the point in which she jumps off the roof. By the way, the show actually shows, like, her having hit the fucking, oh my god, that completely shocked me. I was like, I did not expect that. Like, we got the cut of, like, her foot, for example, like bruised and cut. I was like, okay, that's it. I've got the implication. No, we see the whole of it. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. Anyway, her statue is at the edge of, like, the precipice. We don't know Neru's yet. That'll follow later. In the case of Rika's, hers is in the flower field. Why in the flower field, though? Because, of course, Chiemi did not die there. At least not as far as I can tell. You'd imagine she would have died at home. That would have made most sense. The statues, to me, represent the point of no return. That's the point in which their fate was unequivocally sealed. So in Chiemi's case, like, she probably was in a flower field at some point for whatever reason, walking home, and came to the conclusion, well, she said, I was fat, I don't want to be fat anymore, I'm going to lose weight, with the end result being starve to death. And in Koito's case, like, her last chance to turn back wasn't by the statue's implication, is the fact that she could at the very last second have changed mind, which also I think speaks to Ai's, like, sense of guilt, because there was still a chance for her, even at the very last minute, to have stopped her, but ultimately that did not happen. So I think that the statues serve really well as a hint, like, of, like, okay, there was a point in which intervention was possible, but at that point there was no more possibility of it. And that remains as a reminder, of course, it's a memory. Like, this is, and it specifically speaks to the guilt that I think both of Rika and I feel. I'm not saying Neru's not got that guilt, but we just don't know enough yet. I think it speaks very much to, like, that kind of guilt. I think that's very true, where you will beat yourself up by, like, what could I have done differently? There must have been a point where it was still possible to save them. I think that's a really powerful motif of the show. And I think it really, really works well with the idea that, in real life, that there is always a possibility until the last minute for someone to step in and save someone.
So to go back to the see no evils and the fact that, like, they leave, like, in their wake splotches of paint everywhere. And not just the see no evils, but, like, specifically the coach. There's this really, like, striking scene of, you kind of have the cameras pulled back a little bit, and you have the coach walking toward Ai, and the half of the room that she walks through is totally, like, spray painted with, like, pink and orange, and it's, like, totally I don't want to use the word disfigure, but that's almost what it seems like, right? You're just totally vandalizing this space, like, making it look totally different to how it actually is. And it just made me think of, like, the coach is engaged in this process of gaslighting Suzuhara, right? Convincing her that she is ugly, is fat, is out of shape, isn't good enough, needs tough love, deserves to be hit, all this stuff. And that is a process of, like, by manipulation, like, changing the perceptions, changing what the world looks like to someone else so that they believe your twisted vision when you communicate it to them. And so it's, like, almost like this physical manifestation of gaslighting. When the coach walks through a room, she alters reality. Like, she alters the way everything looks. She's trying to, like, pull you into her kind of what she wants reality to be, what she wants.
There's a great POV shot, by the way, when Ai is trying to reach for the ribbon. And what I think is really effective about that is you see the splatters on the floor as the coach approaches from behind. You don't get to see it, it's from Ai's POV. But again, like I think that also, apart from just being terrifying in its own right, as far as like setting up the action goes, it really again goes to show like how people have a presence that you know they're in the room. You might not even be looking at them necessarily, but they still like can alter the way you behave and put fear into you.
Yeah. Yep. And I love the scene in episode 2 when I is calling out when Suzuhara is saying like, you don't have to help me. It's true. I really am bad. I'm a bad person and I'm ugly and I deserve it. And I is just like, no, you want someone. What you're really saying is you want someone to see you. You're crying for help. You want to be acknowledged and loved. And I am not going to leave you. I can't leave you alone. It's such a like, I mean, it's just beautiful. It really struck me as like the right response to that is
words that she should have said to Kaiso, arguably.
Oh,
and I'm not judging her for not doing that, because again, I think that unconsciously there is a distinction in her mind between the people in the other world versus actual living, breathing people in reality. And I think that she's just not realized that actively, and that's playing into how she interacts with them.
And the final thing I'll say, because I don't have anything more to add about episode 3 or episode 1, I don't think. The final thing I'll say, because I can't let the show end without talking about them, penis nipples.
Oh, Jesus.
Sausage nipples. Balloon doggies or snakes. Just weird. Like,
dick tits.
Penis dick tits on the monster. On the monster coach.
They're just regular boobs.
Oh.
Well, I say they're regular boobs. Jesus Christ. It's like God. It's like H.R. Geiger designed a fertility idol and then put it through, like, you know,
it is.
Like,
they're very phallic. Yeah.
Oh, anyway. Oof. God. I have one final thing I'll add as a quick comment, by the way. Did you get the big Koso from Kyushu Giga Energy when she bopped the monster in episode 1 with
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That was great.
That ruled.
That was really good.
That ruled. I love that every time. I think it's been every time. At least 2 of the 3 times, you know, if you are going to look for the Ikuhara style repetition and ritual and magical girlify this, it feels like she says, "Now I'm really mad." When she like bops them, that's when she can get the final blow in, and she has to say, "Now I'm mad."
Yeah, that's pretty good. All right. Well, we're not quite done with the podcast yet because we do have an extra section at the end of this, but we'll conclude our discussion of Wonder Egg Priority episodes 1 through 3. So, Doc, let's rate them. I'm going to pass it over to you first. How would you rate this first block of episodes?
I would rate this first block of episodes. I would rate it. I'm gonna go 4.5 pink strands of hair in an otherwise blonde head out of 5. Because I think visually the show is almost like untouchable. Beautiful, gorgeous production. Musically, it's fantastic. So it's very like sensorially engaging. And then I think, you know, the content, and we've been talking about it for a while, and we still, I don't think, haven't mined everything there is to mine about it. And I think for the most part, thus far, it has walked, it has towed the line in terms of like being sort of tactfully, tastefully, artfully dealing with extremely difficult topics in a way that feels like that they're approaching it with care and understanding rather than exploitation or trauma for trauma's sake or just ignorance.
Agreed. I will also give it 4.5 thematically appropriate sunflower hoodies out of 5. This is a rich work. It is certainly very, very, how should I say, like, it's very encouraging that we still get stuff like this holy crap. I am legitimately impressed with pretty much all of it. Animation, the music, the motifs, the ideas, the themes, all of it so far. The characters as well, I should stress. Like, it still has its moments for fun. There's some lovely little like eye expressions, like when she does like some like little like cat like faces, like when she's wrapped in the curtain. Like, it allows itself moments of levity so we can breathe and come down from the, or rather come up, shall we say, from the lows, the narrative lows of the other awful shit that's going on. But it also isn't pulling its punches with what it's choosing to cover so far either. So I am very enthusiastic for it. The reason I haven't given it the full 5 is mostly just because there are bits that seem a little shaky. And I'm going to Zeus actually said it probably better than I could, which is I'll give it 4.99 plus X, where X is a mysterious variable depending on what happens in the rest of the series. And that could very well be a negative, Like, it's true that, if you get to the end of a show and it's bad, then it colors the rest of the show for you. That's happened with me numerous times. So yeah, I'm going to give it 4.5, but I'm going to put the asterisk around it of this could very well change depending on how the rest of the show pans out. And as always, like we said with Decadence, like we said with Aizoken, like we said with every other good show, you run into the curse of when you set up such a good standard at the start, you now have to meet and exceed it.
Oh boy.
You've laid down the gauntlet for yourself.
Yeah.
You've got to, deliver now on it. I've got very high expectations for the next set of episodes.
I know.
That's my basic summary of it. It's a phenomenal start. It's the best thing of this season thus far, in an otherwise strong season. Let's just hope it delivers on it and doesn't go into shaky territory or implications as a result of what it's choosing to cover.
Yes, indeed. And okay, so we have talked about Wonder Egg Priority, episodes 1 through 3, but now we're going to transition to lighter fare and talk about, since this is a stream of thought, that's right, you know it, you love it, it's what's going to go into the Warui Deshou Hall of Fame. Hit the music.
Punch it.
Okay, so it's the Warui Deshou Hall of Fame. It's our Hall of Fame. Whatever we want to go in it that's anime or anime adjacent, be it industry, people, characters, works, scenes, poses, whatever, it's going in. So far, we have Thorkel punching a bear right in the schnoz in the manga Vinland Saga, inducted by Shadon. I've inducted the Gunbuster Robot pose. And Shadon, why don't you set up your inductee for this week?
Well, people listening at home, or wherever you may be listening to this, you probably should be at home anyway, but that's beside the point. I have a question for you. Have you ever watched something where you realized in real time what was going on and you kind of felt your knuckles biting as you gripped the edge of your seat? And you almost kind of like felt your hair stand up on end? Yes, that actually happened to me, even though I was bald at the time, I assure you. And you just really wanted to start yelling and whooping and cheering because holy crap, this is the most, this is just epic. It gives you that kind of energy, like where you feel like you're watching something spectacular unfold in real time that you otherwise did not see coming. That kind of special in the zone feeling. I had that with this particular moment, and it popped into my head when Doc asked me, what would you induct in Hall of Fame? What still sticks out? I'm like, I still remember this scene, even though I've not watched the film for a while. And I'm just going to basically say that it is from the second Macross Frontier movie. It is, of course, the Macross Quarter surfing in from atmosphere on a piece of metal while the music's playing.
God.
And
that's so good.
I literally, if I had been drinking a beer or anything at the time that I saw this, I'd have spat it out in disbelief because it's just so amazing. You literally have a giant transforming robot. I love my stuff with substance and all that, but there's sometimes where I just love the pure spectacle of it. And, I'm going to surf this giant robot in from atmosphere on a piece of metal to avoid, 10 million warships on the planet from blowing us up. I'm going to make it look incredibly stylish while doing so. And by the way, all completely foreshadowed in the earlier part of the film. But, that's like a how should we say, a popcorn and peanuts moment. Like that's like your big film moment that it earned. It wasn't like headache inducing. It was just awesome. It was amazing. I feel like whoever wrote that moment or conceptualized it probably said to themselves, "I'm on a fucking roll here. This is a real winner." Like
Shoji Kawamori.
Yeah. What if this robot surfed in from the atmosphere and we made it all look badass and they were like, "Shoji, like you literally have just spun straw into gold. He's done it again. The madman."
Oh my god. Genius.
But yeah, it's a phenomenal moment, and I watched it again before and I was like, this still holds up.
Too good. Bobby, also awesome in the moment. The best. His name Bobby, right? Who was the helmsman?
Bobby was one of the he wasn't the captain though.
Right. Yeah. No.
Bobby was one of them. The captain was the one who was surfing, and then like he's just like, "I'm gonna surf the robot."
Yes.
Like, okay, fair.
No,
you know
he was surfing. Yeah. And Bobby, and maybe it's in the TV show that Bobby's just like, "We're going full, like maximum drive or whatever." But God, Macross F, full of many of these moments that will be in this Hall of Fame.
Undoubtedly. I mean, eventually, of course, we have to throw in Cheryl just like literally paying them on her credit card.
Throwing the black American, the Amex equivalent.
I didn't realize Diners Club could be used to buy PMCs, but here we are.
Awesome. All right. Well, that's going to do it for the HOF.
I felt you wouldn't deny me putting that in the Hall of Fame unless you can replace with some sort of like, twisted alternate version of yourself.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I guess no, I will not veto it. I accept it. This is inducted. We have our third inductee.
I thought you might. Good. Well, okay. That brings us to the end, I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. All
right. I will close out then. So if you've enjoyed this podcast, say firstly, thank you very much for joining us, or thank you very much for listening after the facts. Your viewership is always appreciated. If you want to support us financially, of course, we do have our Patreon at patreon.com/Warui Deshou. Get yourself on the $2, $3, or $5 tiers for increasing benefits and rewards. All the way up to 2 additional podcasts every week, one every week, of course, but 2 additional podcast lines, ability to ask us questions, get invited to our Discord. We have a really lovely community, all wonderful people. Definitely getting on that. If you don't want to support us financially, because of course times are tough, every penny counts. Got to keep it all close. Totally cool by me. Just drop us a subscribe on YouTube, on Apple Music. SoundCloud, sorry, not Sound. Why I keep saying SoundCloud? That's dead. Spotify, thank you. There we go. Spotify, all the services that we exist on. That would be very much appreciated. Doc, where can people find you on the the cesspit that is known as the internet?
Yukinon asks in chat, how can I support financially more? I think Patreon allows you to edit your pledge higher than any tier. But you
put all of your money in a bundle and shoot it out of a t-shirt gun at me. There you go.
But you can still have you could still like make that your monthly pledge, or there if you go to our Anchor page, we use Anchor to push our podcast to different platforms. So it's anchor.fm. F as in fairies, M as in manly. Anchor.fm/Warui Deshou. There's like a button on there that no one has used. Like, what does it say? Like, there's like a money bag icon next to it, so you can know exactly what it is.
I can't.
Well, I'm typing in this URL as we speak live so that I can tell you exactly what button to click. And for some reason, it's taking forever to load. Support. It says support, where you can make a one-time donation like you would via PayPal or something like that.
Please support me. I can barely stand up anymore. Yeah. Oh, wait, no.
Also, I haven't promoted this in a while, but on that page you can leave voicemails for us, and if you do, we'll absolutely play it on the podcast and answer the question. So again, not a feature anyone has taken advantage of yet, but anchor.fm/Warui Deshou to do one-time support and also voicemail for the pod.
Hello, I'm calling about your uncle's inheritance. You just need to stay overnight on his cursed farm. Please ring me back with for more details. Thank you. Bye. Beep.
The one that I get every day is fucking hello. This is the second notice that we've given you that the factory warranty on your vehicle has expired. Please contact us to... Nope, I've already hung up. I don't even listen that far, to be honest with you. I don't want to buy
I get
warranty scam.
I get phone calls occasionally saying we've had news that you've been in a car accident, and I always keep saying back to them, "Oh, do you mean the one that caused me to lose my memory and forget that ever happened?"
That's good. I like that. I appreciate this.
Jog on.
All right.
That takes us to the end then.
Twitter, where am I? I'm at the Subtle Doctor on Twitter. Follow me to see my burgeoning love for Asian cinema unfold in real time. And,
Doc's got the camera. He's even got the camera on right now.
Camera. Yes, I've got the camera. I haven't been able to get rid of it since I got it. So, no, it's the kaiju, the tokusatsu, and exploring different kinds of Hong Kong action cinema, kung fu movies. I'm getting into all these things, wading into those waters. And then, of course, anime, manga, and the Japanese puroresu are always in heavy rotation on the Twitter.
I'll do that. For me, you can find me at Shadon1010. Mine's just a medley of stuff and usually me yelling about the state of my government. I apologize. I'm going to try and dial that back a little bit in the near future and put actual more anime content there and talk about stuff I've watched. But yeah, if you want to follow me, you can do so on there. Why not? You get to see some occasionally retweets of good art and stuff. I actually do have a little bit of taste here and there. Surprising though that may sound. Anyway.
So you did mention that we've got either Horimiya or Skate coming up for $3 subscribers. For $5, we've got the Girls Last Tour. But I want to mention also for, the $2 tier of our Patreon will get you access to, of course, Discord, our after hours, which are Q&A pods, which we do fairly regularly. But also there is... I have started doing solo coverage, episodic coverage of The Promised Neverland Season 2, which I promised I would do because I love that show so much. It's not going to be the full, 2+ hour marathon that these kind of episodes are, but I'm taking notes as I watch these, and I don't know, maybe some of them will. Maybe I'll find the talking point that I just want to write a thesis about. But yeah, I'm covering that for all patrons. So if you want to, if your budget allows or you want to support us at that tier, you will get some extra pod content for sure.
Faux show. All right, that brings us to the end of the podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I hope you all have a lovely weekend. Take care, stay safe. All in trying times, still not quite out of the woods yet, but yeah, do look after yourselves. We'll be back next week, of course, with Skate to Horimiya, whichever one it is that we end up talking about. We'll figure that out separately. We'll see. But until that time, of course, as always, embrace you, everyone, to the ends of the universe. Good night.
Bring back the brothers.